Go Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution, and we have a World War III alert. But before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button, like, share, subscribe. Let everybody know Go Figure Live. Any day now, the nuclear bombs could start falling. Salute, family. And I got to continue to let y'all know that they want to distract y'all with political information, which we will get into that. But first, we got to understand that Putin put NATO in their place. But will NATO actually surrender in Ukraine? Let's find out.
This is WW3. We have the Kremlin releasing fresh statements following the ones that they released in terms of a nuclear strike happening. They now have their ambassador to the United States making comments in regards to the American people. And they're talking about what will happen here if Biden was to jump on board with everyone wanting to use long-range weapons deep inside of Russia. Now, from the American side, they're trying to say that it really wouldn't help us strategically to do this, but anything is an option. And this ambassador is saying that the American people in their leadership are under illusion. They seem to think that if there is a conflict, it will not spread to the territory of the United States.
Now, yesterday on my live, I played the Russian ambassador's speech at the UN, so y'all can hear him speaking. He let them know the US and the UK and France particularly will definitely not be able to whine to the world that they wasn't expecting the big boom. Because if they allow Ukraine to use their weapons to strike Russia, he told them, let's stop playing games. I'm going to play Putin words one more time. And like I've been saying, American, salute, roll up that dinner, family. American advanced weapons can't be used by non-Americans unless you're in NATO and you've been trained for years. You see? Putin been playing with them. All right, y'all acting like they using the Patriot system. All right, I just blow it up in Ukraine. You better not be coming to Russia with your Patriot system. All right, y'all acting like they using the HIMARS system. Okay, we'll pretend as we blow it up and blow up those American crews in Ukraine. You better not try that in Russia. But now you want to pretend like Ukraine is striking us. Playtime is over. That changes everything. And guess what? Uncle Sam woke up today. Uncle Sam been in a slumber. Uncle Sam said, oh, hell no. We don't want our house to burn. You know? So, but the small hats run these governments. So Americans is like, whoa, wait a minute. What's going on? But the Zionists will never surrender.
To me, it's a pretty ominous warning.
They in they bunkers right now.
It seems it's exactly where they will take it. And this ambassador continues by stressing that Americans can't hide from nuclear war if the unthinkable happens. We just had Vladimir Putin. His closing statement was that there will be no winners. Not them. Not once as he said, we will win. They keep repeatedly saying, we're all going to.
Putin is no one can understand his mind. I think he's thinking of a world without NATO, you know, and when I don't mean a world just out the military lines. I'm talking about without a lot of their civilization, their civilians. I think Putin, and I'm gonna show y'all, he's dispatched his defense minister. Well, he's no longer the defense minister. He's his number 2 in the Security Council. Soji. He dispatched him to North Korea. Kim Jong-un, just for the first time, did a walkthrough. I'm going to play that video through his nuclear. The U.S. was shocked. Britain was shocked. Like, goddamn, we don't need spies if Kim Jong-un just going to walk through. Kim Jong-un, like, nigga, let the curtains down. Let them people see my power. I'm a nuclear titan. Then next thing you know, the Russian second in command went over there to talk to him. What the hell do you think they're talking to? Kim Jong-un is Putin's attack dog. That's right. I've been telling you, you think Ukraine won't play crazy? Well, guess what? Putin got some crazy friends too.
Going to get wiped out if this was to pop off. Now, I personally think that they wouldn't go to the lengths of sending hundreds and thousands of bombs in every direction. tipped with nukes. I'm thinking that if something was to happen, it would happen a smaller scale, tactical nuke size in some kind of city, maybe DC, somewhere they want a building 7 and get rid of all evidence of all the dirt they've ever done. Something like that, a tit for tat, plus it would be strategic. It would be the tactical heart of where they need to hit if you're Russia. The command, anywhere is wide open right now. But when they're making these comments that the American people are just sitting there basically in a dream, in dreamland, maybe everyone better wake up. It seems we're on the doorstep of big events. I hope it's not nuclear in fashion, but tactical nukes can be used in any location and not yield the radiation.
Listen, man, it was a time when no one thought the U.S. was going to nuke Japan. Why did the U.S. nuke Japan? Because they didn't want to be. Japan would never surrender. Japan would have fought to the last Japanese, and the U.S. didn't want to fight like that. So they dropped nukes on them, get it over quick. So the U.S. better understand, Putin don't feel like wrestling. Putin don't want to wrestle with NATO. So he was like, man, I might as well get this thing over with quick. He can. I've been telling people a long time ago, it is not mutual destruction anymore. They hit us, we hit them. That is a damn lie. Russia can absolutely deal with the West and live a life.
A very high level in Great Britain and the United States, the topic of the Kiev regime being capable of carrying out strikes deep into Russian territory with Western long-range weapons is being discussed, and, apparently, this decision is either about to be made or has already been made. Of course, this is an extraordinary topic. I would like to casually comment on what is happening. There is an attempt to substitute concepts, because they are not talking about allowing or prohibiting the Kiev regime from carrying out strikes into Russian territory. It is already striking Russia with the help of unmanned aerial vehicles and other means. But when it comes to using high-precision long-range weapons of Western manufacture, it is a completely different story. The fact is that I have already spoken about this, and any experts will confirm this, both here and in the West, that the Ukrainian army is not capable of carrying out strikes with modern high-precision long-range forces of Western manufacture. They cannot do this. This is possible only with the use of intelligence data from a satellite, which Ukraine does not have. This is only data from a satellite of European Union or the United States in general. These are NATO satellites. This is the first. The second.
All Putin telling them, if you really want war, then I'll give you war. No hiding your hand. He letting them know, I'm not telling you you can't do it. Do it. But don't think I'm just going to destroy Ukraine. No. He warned them, whatever you do, I'm going to do it to you. Whatever Ukraine does to Russia, that Putin got big gangster with US and UK and France. Whatever they do to us, we're going to do to you. The US is not the bullet. Putin bullied them live on TV.
And this is very important. Perhaps this is the key thing, which is that flight missions in these missile systems can only be carried out by military personnel of NATO countries. Ukrainian military personnel cannot do this. Therefore, the issue is not about allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons, or not. The issue is about making a decision about whether NATO countries are directly involved in the military conflict or not. If this decision is generally accepted, it will mean nothing other than the direct participation of NATO, the United States, European countries in the war in Ukraine.
Come on, man. The United States.
This will be their
So, and all that. Some people say, well, he need to put a name on there. Who in NATO? He's the United States. He's doing it on purpose. Forget all that NATO stuff. U.S. His ambassador already said that your oceans will not protect you from what we're going to do to you.
Direct participation. And this, of course, significantly changes the very essence and nature of this conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States of America, European countries are fighting with Russia. And if this is true, then, given the change in the essence of this conflict, we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats which they will create for us. Thank you very much.
Against the backdrop of the rapidly deteriorating situation of the armed forces of Ukraine on the battlefield, Western leaders began to lose their minds with the realization that Russia's victory in this conflict was simply becoming inevitable. On the one hand, it is possible to understand the resentment of Western leaders, since Moscow's victory in this conflict will finally destroy the old world order and put an end to the unipolar world. Moreover, Russia's victory in this conflict will also mark the beginning of the end of the North Atlantic Alliance. Western leaders are well aware that if Russia wins in Ukraine, then the remaining authority and influence of the United States around the world will simply be destroyed. For more than 2 years, the whole world has been watching how Western countries, led by the United States, are waging a real hybrid war against Russia, using Ukraine as a bargaining chip. During these 2 years, Western countries, led by the United States, have done everything possible to destroy Russia and bring Moscow to its knees. However, as time has shown, the multi-billion-dollar military aid project for Ukraine and the supply of modern types of Western weapons to Kiev, including NATO military instructors and active-duty soldiers and officers, could not turn the tide of the war in favor of the Ukrainian army. Moreover, even unprecedented Western sanctions have failed to weaken Russia's military potential and its economy. On the contrary, these Western sanctions have even made Russia stronger from an economic point of view, making this country's economy the largest in Europe.
They see.
In many ways, this was made possible thanks to the limitless possibilities of Russia and its inexhaustible natural resources. Describing the West's hybrid war against Russia, even the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, said that the West had suffered a crushing defeat in the confrontation with Russia.
Putin.
According to him, Russia is a real superpower that cannot be defeated not only on the battlefield, but also with the help of economic sanctions. President of El Salvador Nayib Bukele noted that no country in the world could withstand such large-scale and unprecedented Western sanctions. According to the Salvadorian leader, thanks to its production capacity, powerful scientific base, and inexhaustible natural resources, Russia has won a complete victory in the economic struggle against the West.
What happened to all the people who used to come into our chat and tell us how I was lying, propaganda, Ukraine was winning? I just wonder what happened to all them people. Did y'all make sure y'all get them the new channel? Did we lose them? Oh, they so humiliated. They probably still in the audience right now. They just shocked. I look like Nostradamus. NATO couldn't be.
The fact that since 2014, Russia has dared to go against the West to protect its own national interests has inspired the countries of the global South and made it clear to them that the dominance of the West has come to an end. Now, before our eyes, the world is changing rapidly, gradually getting rid of the unipolar world order, where the countries of the global South did not have the right to comply with their own national interests. And those countries that tried to show at least some initiative, respecting the interests of their own citizens.
Putin been waiting on this ever since they killed Saddam. Man, this man been sitting back. Then they knocked off Gaddafi, threatened him, threatened him. John McCain, after they did Gaddafi, said it could be him. Then John McCain died. Oh my goodness. Then tried to take out Assad in Syria, and always naming him. Always naming him. So Putin been sitting back waiting to fight these people. Waiting to forget the flunkies. Forget the proxy wars. He been waiting for war with these people to do away with them.
Citizens were immediately destroyed by Western leaders with the help of so-called color revolutions and political coups.
He should have stepped in Libya. He should have never let him put Gaddafi. We're in there now, but it's too late. Oh, but in Libya, I'm about to do a story on that. Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, he is running for president right now, and the West is pissed. He wanted by the International Criminal Court. They pissed. Gaddafi's son finna run the country now, and the people want Saif al-Islam to back him, and the Russian military is backing the militias and armies that's fighting to help put him back in power. So, but they should have never let Gaddafi be tortured and killed. That was a big mistake, and that's why all of the terrorists is spread all throughout Africa, because they let Gaddafi get killed.
And now, in 2024, seeing how the West is suffering a crushing defeat in the confrontation with Russia, the countries of the global South finally have hope for a better future. Now these countries were given the possibility to use their natural resources not to enrich Western countries, but to develop their own economies. Just a decade ago, the arrival of a multipolar world seemed to be a distant dream for many. However, Russia's harsh actions and Moscow's determination to defend its own interests no matter what, gave a powerful impetus to the development of a multipolar world, prompting the countries of the global South to start fighting for their national interests and finally say no to the West. Even Turkey, seeing the rapid approach of a multipolar world and the decline of the old world order, decided to submit an official application to join the BRICS. Surprisingly, the West's ally, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, recognized that the future belongs to the BRICS and the countries of the global South. According to him, the West is rapidly losing its influence, and that the geopolitical center of gravity is shifting away from countries with developed economies. A few days ago, Azerbaijan and Thailand also submitted official applications to join the BRICS. Currently, the BRICS members are Egypt, Russia, Brazil, China, India, South Africa, the United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, and Iran. According to Russian President Vladimir Putin, as of 2024, 30 more countries have expressed their desire to join the BRICS. Vladimir Putin noted that against the backdrop of the approach of a multipolar world, the BRICS is only getting stronger every year, and that this only strengthens multilateralism for equitable global development and the security of world countries. Meanwhile, seeing Russia's successes on the world stage as well as on the battlefield in Ukraine, Western leaders simply began to go crazy, bringing humanity closer to World War III. The invasion of the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region horrified all world experts and analysts. The fact is that everyone understands perfectly well that without the military support of NATO and the Pentagon's intel, the Ukrainian army would never have been able to carry out a military operation in the Kursk region. All this has once again proved that the West, being desperate, is ready not only to cross all Russia's red lines, but also to escalate the conflict openly. The last straw in Russia's patience was the fact that Western leaders began to declare that they would allow Ukraine to strike with long-range Western weapons deep into Russian territory. Russia's harsh reaction to such statements by Western leaders was not long in coming. In particular, Russian President Vladimir Putin bluntly stated that if the Ukrainian army begins to strike with long-range Western weapons on the territory of Russia, it will mean that European countries, including the United States, have decided to enter into direct conflict with Russia. Putin has openly warned that Russia will give a tough response to Western countries, including the United States, if Ukraine starts using long-range Western weapons against Russian territory. Against this backdrop, I would also like to draw your attention to the statement by Deputy Chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev.
And that's the one.
In particular, he said,
one right there. That's the one that they got to worry about. That's the one who want maximum damage to the West, because he was in power when they killed Gaddafi. He abstained in the UN, and he should have vetoed it. He should have vetoed the bill. He got tricked. Putin was pissed. He got tricked. The U.S. act like they just was going to go in and protect civilians, then they targeted and killed Gaddafi. But he ain't never forgot. He want his get back. But like I say, if Putin happens to slip, getting out of his bed, hit his head, going to a coma, it's the end of the U.S. And they don't want to do that. This man is not playing no games. And they talk about some sucker was going to be the leader of Russia. Are you crazy? Because they know a lot of y'all don't understand this. But this Putin attack dog, he personally trained this man. Workout buddy, little homie, very vicious, and always want the most damage done to the West.
Said that Western leaders think that Russia will not dare to use its nuclear weapons because of missile strikes on Russian territory, and therefore they are escalating the conflict. Yes, we really don't need a nuclear conflict. However, the prerequisites for Russia's use of its nuclear weapons have already begun to appear, including the events in the Kursk region. Russia continues to show patience, which sooner or later will come to an end. Everything is going to the point that Russia will use nuclear weapons because of these pompous Anglo-Saxon maniacs in London and Washington, Dmitry Medvedev said. Well, my friends, it seems that the West is really poorly aware of the seriousness of the situation and will bring the level of escalation to such a state, when a giant nuclear cloud in the form of a fungus will appear not only in Central and Western Europe, but also in London and Washington.
That's cool.
North Korea has, for the first time, publicly revealed a uranium enrichment facility, a key component of its nuclear weapons program.
This is a slap in the face to the West. This is a humiliation of Joe Biden and the U.S. military, the British military, France, Germany, Portuguese, Dutch, Belgium, all of them, the Nordic nation, all of them, humiliation. Ha! Kick South Korea in the butt. Japan, they scared right now. The man, Israel won't do this. The man is in his uranium facility live streaming. I'm down here, U.S. Look at all the power I got. Why is he doing this? Remember, picture is worth 1,000 words. He want the U.S. and NATO to get it. Oh, Russia not gonna fight alone. If it's gonna be a big party, I want in.
This display of its nuclear arsenal development is being seen as an attempt to put pressure on the U.S. ahead of the presidential elections. Our Moon Hae-ryun starts us off.
North Korea showed its uranium enrichment facility for the first time, as leader Kim Jong-un took a tour of the site and urged further nuclear weapon development. Photos released by the state-run Korean Central News Agency on Friday showed Kim walking past rows of centrifuges, learning about the operation of its production lines.
See, North Korea knew the U.S. was some punks and was scared and phonies. NATO was phony when they decided to attack Iraq instead of attacking North Korea. If anybody go back to 2003, North Korea hadn't announced they was a nuclear weapon state yet. It just was rumored, like it's rumored Israel got. It was rumored. But the U.S., I want you to think about that. If the U.S. military was actually trying to go stop somebody from proliferating and having weapons of mass destruction like they said Saddam had, why didn't they go attack North Korea? Maybe because they'd already got their butt kicked once and chased up out of Korea. That's why it is in North Korea. Or because they knew Kim would have nuked them in. You see, you can't take the U.S. serious. Kim, he already know they some phonies. But now he's warning them. Since y'all won't come and challenge me, maybe I'm going to have to come see you where you at in America.
Uranium needs to go through a process called enrichment to be developed into an effective nuclear fuel, spun in a centrifuge to separate its isotopes and concentrate the one that is needed. The KCNA did not reveal when the visit occurred or the location of the facility. Kim reportedly expressed great satisfaction during his visit, saying he felt strong just looking at the technology on display, and praised the achievements of scientists, engineers, and the military.
Damn right he feels strong. You feel like a Korean guard down there, knowing the U.S. don't want no smoke. They can talk all that tough talk all they want. It'll be the end of their civilization if they cross Kim. Oh, yes. Kim got some Fidel in him. See, oh, I wish Fidel Castro would. No, I don't wish he would have got him because he was going to nuke the U.S. Wouldn't be no us. Fidel, it is in classified documents. The whole world know Fidel was begging Russia to nuke the U.S. They better be lucky Fidel didn't get no weapons, nigga. He wasn't going to tolerate any more disrespect. But Kim like, I got him. Now I got to wait for him to make the wrong move. But they talking tough.
In the nuclear weapons production sector. Calling for an increase in the number of centrifuges, he pressed the need to strengthen Pyongyang's nuclear capabilities and outlined a long-term plan to do so. South Korea and U.S. intelligence authorities believe that North Korea has uranium enrichment facilities in Yongbyon, North Pyongan province, and in the Kangsan complex near Pyongyang. In 2010, North Korea invited U.S. nuclear physicist Siegfried Hecker to a uranium enrichment facility at the Yongbyon nuclear facility. In an interview last year, Hecker estimated that their total uranium production capacity is about 150 kilograms, roughly 6 bombs worth per year. North Korea's surprise disclosure of the uranium enrichment facility is interpreted as an attempt to put pressure on future negotiations with the U.S. by showing off its nuclear armament ahead of the U.S. presidential election, which is about 50 days away. Stepping up to put the spotlight on the regime's fighting capabilities, Kim was reported to have visited the training facility of North Korea's Special Operations Forces to oversee a combat drill on Wednesday, according to a separate KCNA report. He was said to have emphasized the importance of enhancing training content and methods, and the role of the Special Operations Forces on the battlefield. 문혜련, 아리랑 News.
See? Talking crazy to the OG Putin. Kim ain't gonna have. Kim not gonna tolerate no disrespect to Putin. Man, I'm trying to tell right now. Kim not going for all that disrespect to Putin, man. Putin is OG. Putin the one got him on his feet like that. So since the U.S. talking tough, Kim Jong-un decided to meet with the defense minister. Today,
경의하는
and discuss
김정은
all kind
동지께서는
of horror
세계의 쇼이구
for the
동지와
West.
반갑게 상봉하시고 1년 만에 다시
Every time the Russians leave from meeting with the North Koreans about 3 or 4 weeks later, they have some type of advanced technology and they can do all kind of new stuff they could never do before.
기쁨을 나누시는 친선적이며
So this is a message to the West.
분위기 속에서 담화를 나누시었습니다. 경애하는 김정은 동지께 보내는 러시아 연방 대통령 김정은 동지께서는 이에 사의를 표하시고 존경하는 러시아 연방 대통령 울라디미르 푸틴 동지에게 보내는 상정된 문제들에 관해
They're not discussing the weather, man. They're not discussing war. And the target is the Britain. The target is France. The target is the U.S. They are discussing that. That's why Uncle Sam got real nervous when Putin let them know, oh, don't think we're just going to do European and you still going to be around here surviving. Hell no, you're going to be first.
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Friday, September 13th, 2024. It's the end of the day and the end of the week. Time for the Intelligence Community Roundtable with my dear friends and colleagues, always doing double duty for us, Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson. Guys, welcome here and much appreciated. The breaking news this afternoon, and Ray, you pointed this out to me. I don't know if this is intended to be an insult to the British Prime Minister or if the Americans are listening to President Putin. But before the British Prime Minister arrived at the White House in order to discuss whether or not the West was going to collectively allow its missiles to be fired deep into Russia, the United States announced that no such decision would come Friday, today. Now, that was theoretically before Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, got there. I don't know if they agreed to this ahead of time, if they wanted to Bigfoot him, or if the emphasis was today, and maybe the announcement's going to come.
Threatened them. He threatened to turn Britain into lava. Something. He threatened them. He said he's going to use a new weapon that never been used before. He told Britain that. He said that it's only going to be lava left when he's done with it.
Tomorrow. What's your read on this, Ray?
Well, I've since learned that the British did announce it about the same time Kirby did. Yes, it was before Starmer knocked on the door of Biden, but it was still very embarrassing. This went across cut across all the things that we had thought would happen. Tony Blinken and Sullivan, they were all very much in favor of allowing these missiles to be used. Now, Putin made it very clear that that would mean that we were at war, NATO, US against Russia. And Kirby's statement, unless you have it there, Chris, I'm going to just read you what Kirby said just 2 hours ago.
Before you read that, Ray, let's play Putin, and then you can read what Kirby said, because Admiral Kirby obviously saw or heard President Putin before he said what he was going to say. Chris, cut number 5 and then back to Ray.
It is not about allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. It is about making a decision about whether NATO countries are directly involved in the. It is not about allowing the Ukrainian regime to strike Russia with these weapons or not. It is about making a decision about whether NATO countries are directly involved in the military conflict or not. If the decision is made, it will mean nothing less than the direct participation of NATO countries, the United States, and European countries in the war in Ukraine. This is their direct participation, and this, of course, significantly changes the very essence, the very nature of the conflict. This will mean that NATO countries, the United States, and European countries are fighting Russia. And if this is so, bearing in mind the change in the very essence of this conflict, we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be created for us.
Clear and clear-headed, as you would expect him to be, Ray.
Very direct and, well, very pointed. Now, I have news for you. John Kirby and his folks were listening. And John Kirby said 2 hours ago, the U.S. is taking seriously Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning that he would consider the West directly involved in the conflict if Ukraine fired Western-made long-range missiles into Russia, end quote. And so what else did John Kirby say? He said, there is no change in our view on the provision of long-range strike capabilities to Ukraine to use inside Russia. I wouldn't.
And Zelensky came out and called them cowards and said they was afraid of Russia.
Not expect any major announcements on that when Keir Starmer arrives later today. And of course, Keir Starmer is talking to Biden right now.
As we speak.
What do I make of that? Finally, the Pentagon talked some sense into Blinken and Sullivan. Maybe they even got to the president and said, look, this is crazy. This is really crazy. We cannot just dust off what Putin says. If we want war, well, we don't want war because we're not prepared for war. So please, Mr. President, don't do what they want you to do. And Starmer's people apparently said the same thing to him. So it looks like we're getting a little pause here. We can breathe a little more easy given the provocation that we would have expected as a result of this visit by the British Prime Minister.
Larry, I think Ray is 100% correct. Here's
the reason the Pentagon, that's our military, came out and trying to stop the State Department, the small hat to controlling the State Department, Anthony Blinken them, and telling the president, don't do it. Why? Because Ukraine want to hit Russia military headquarters and things of that nature. Russia already told them, if they do that, we're going to hit the U.S. military. So the Pentagon's like, oh, hell no, because they're going to get hit. They know it. Putin not playing. He told them, whatever Ukraine do to us, we're going to do it to you.
Secretary Blinken on Tuesday, just 4 days ago, not ruling out the long-range missiles. Cut number 6.
It's not simply saying, oh, should they have this weapon system or that weapon system? There are a lot.
You lose it, Chris?
Well,
that is Secretary Blinken expressing a very different and more bellicose view, though, in his own terms and his own terminology. Larry.
Well, here's what doesn't make sense.
It's not simply saying, oh, should they have this weapon system or that weapon system? There are a lot of things that go into it. Do they know how to use it? And some of these sophisticated systems take training, and that's one of the other things we've done. Can they maintain it? Because if you give them something.
Okay, so what they're saying qualifies as a long-range missile now are the ATACMS and the Storm Shadows. Well, last time I checked, Ukraine has already used those missile systems inside Russia. They have attacked Crimea with it. They've attacked places along the border. So they've already used them, number one. And what Putin said was correct. The only way Ukraine could use them was with U.S. involvement. So we've had U.S. involvement now for 2 years. What changed this week was what you played earlier on with Putin's statement. Because prior to that statement, Keir Starmer's group folks were leaking that, yeah, we're going to approve Ukraine striking inside Russia.
Right.
And Blinken was doing his business, the Bojangles tap dance, as I call it. Putin comes out and says, if this happens now, we're going to treat this as an act of war, and we're going to target you, NATO, you, the United States, and by implication, the satellite systems that are used to target it.
What do you think he would do, Larry? You don't think he would strike Miami or New York, do you?
No. I think actually the first option the Russians would exercise would be to take out Starlink and the other satellites, the ISR capability of the United States, because that would send a message. It wouldn't necessarily provoke a nuclear response like taking out a city, but it would definitely impair the capabilities of the United States and NATO to continue to provide targeting data to the Ukrainians. And I think that the nature of what was conveyed by Putin, they may have even passed back channels saying, hey, everything's on the table now, guys. So either cut this out or, the acronym FAFO, fool around, find out.
Right.
Yeah.
Ray, what do you think about the Defense Department? They probably advised against this because the last thing they want are their satellites to be destroyed by Russian military.
Well, also the last thing they want is to get involved in a war with Russia. Let's face it, Russia has the advantage in many of the hypersonic and more sophisticated missilery that they've built over the last 7-8 years. Putin has advised about that. We don't have hypersonic missiles. Well, the U.S. forces do not want to get involved in a war with Russia. Besides, Russia has all manner of equipment, short of nuclear missiles or nuclear bombs, to retaliate against whatever the U.S. throws up against them. So that's been proven in Ukraine. This is kind of Zelensky try with Biden and Sullivan to do something really drastic and make sure that something happens before the U.S. election so that the U.S. people will continue to support Ukraine no matter which wins.
Larry, when you and Ray were on Monday, we played clips for you of Sir Peter Moore, the head of MI6, and Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, at a Financial Times public gathering in London on the previous Saturday, in which they both praised the Ukrainians for the successful military maneuver into Kursk, and in which Sir Peter actually went so far as to say this war started in February of 2022, and Putin has lost. This must have degraded the two of them in the eyes of the intelligence community around the world. They came across as fools, no?
Yeah, I wish I had the capability where you can create film clips. So I would show them doing the discussion after the battle at Little Bighorn with Custer, saying, General Custer did really well out there today, and we just like to give him kudos. Or just pick up, or after the fall and collapse of the United States in Vietnam and in Saigon in April 75. Hey, here's Bill Burns and Peter Moore. We did a really great job here in Saigon, and this is just great. That's what they're doing. I mean, it's that kind of delusional stuff. And at some point, you've got to stand up and say, how could these guys, they're not uneducated. Well, and they're not mentally retarded. They're not.
Could you imagine the director of the CIA sitting down with MI6 at the same time, in the same place, in the same room, on international television, and expressing political opinions like this?
Well, I could imagine them expressing political opinions that were grounded in reality. I could never imagine this kind of divorce from reality, because again, neither of them are mentally retarded. They've got full functioning brains. They're not suffering from Alzheimer's or some sort of dementia. Right. They're both educated men. I mean, they're both experienced. There was a time, when I was at State, Bill Burns was a young guy. This was 34 years ago. So he would have been late 30s. But here he is now, having gone from writing an exceptional cable in 2008 back to the State Department when he was ambassador to Russia, saying, hey, don't keep pushing this NATO thing on Ukraine, because the Russians are saying no means no, niet means niet. And now he's doing this. I mean, what an embarrassment.
Ray, what is your view of the drone attack on Moscow? According to the Russians, the Ukrainians unleashed 140 drones and the Russians disabled 139. But the one that got through hit a residential building, killed an innocent civilian woman, and injured 6 civilians. Is this a pinprick, an annoyance, or a sign of more to come?
It's the former.
Moscow.
It's the former, and anything that the Ukraine or the UK or we can do in terms of long-range missiles will be also pinpricks. Meanwhile, the war in Kursk is going really bad for those invading Ukrainian troops. They're up to 10,000 already killed in there. The rest will be surrounded, captured, or killed. On the Eastern Front, where it really matters, the Russians are going twice as fast as they were before. Everyone acknowledges that, including the Ukrainians. And what's Zelensky doing? He's in Yalta with who? With whom? With Boris Johnson. And he's saying, Boris, you are the best. And so we have to depend on what you said way back in April of 2022, when you assured us that we would have to depend on you and that you would be with us for as long as it takes. Remember that, Boris?
Yeah,
that all came out in public today. So it's a desperate attempt by Zelensky to say, oh, shit. I mean, bummer. We've been deceived again. They're leaving us.
Yeah.
Listen, we don't get in trouble with, won't even mention their name, the folks that host this program when you say that. We only get in trouble when we say other things about a horrific political party in Germany in the 30s. Anyway, Larry, I want to get back to Burns and Moore. Wouldn't they be ridiculed by their own people as soon as this program was over? What are you talking about? It started in 2022. It started in 2014 and maybe in 2004. What do you mean it was a smart move? What do you mean Putin has lost? No?
No, actually, I think it's just the opposite. I had a chat with Matt Ho the other day, and he was describing an encounter he had with some of the staff officers that worked for General Stanley McChrystal in Afghanistan. When the Afghanistan was just, you know, a flaming bag of dog excrement. And
but that's not the way Ray would characterize it, but go ahead.
But Matt responded. He was talking to these guys about how bad the situation was, and he said to a person, they were all sycophants. They were so busy sucking up to and telling McChrystal, "Hey, boss, you're right," and "Hey, boss, if you believe that, it must be the right thing." So that's what's going on here. You don't have anybody with a stature that can go to Bill Burns and say, "Yo, hey, Burnsy, man, you're embarrassing yourself here. You're making yourself look like a complete fool. Come on, speak up, speak the truth." We see this over and over. Like when the Republicans came out with that report on the evacuation from Afghanistan, there was not one single criticism of the U.S. military in that at all. About, you know, they got an order to do something which was incredibly stupid, and nobody in the chain of command threw their stars on the table and said, "No, sir, I'm not going to follow that order. It's going to get people killed." No, they all went along. That's Washington. Burns, he's just become a creature of that environment.
Well, jumping over to Israel, for the third time, Prime Minister Netanyahu said he ordered the IDF to be ready to invade southern Lebanon, and for the third time, it didn't happen, or at least it didn't happen yet. What do you make of this, Ray?
Well, I think there too, the military has some say in what happens. That would be crazy. The Israeli military are against it. And why President Biden and Blinken and Sullivan don't realize that they have an ally there. If they just say, well, we won't support an enlargement of the war, then the Israeli military would have a cudgel to beat against Netanyahu and say, look, you tell us the U.S. is in their full strength. They're saying publicly they're not going to support an enlarged war. Then the Israeli military will be able to have a little bit more sustenance and power. And that's the only hope that I have, that Netanyahu can be restrained, because he too has personal interests here that are driving part of his motivation.
Larry, is there any hope that Netanyahu can be restrained from the continuing slaughter in Gaza? Any? It's not going to come from Donald Trump. It's not going to come from Kamala Harris. Is this slaughter going to continue for as long as Netanyahu is in office and the American government is in an iron grip of the donor class?
The only one who could possibly make a difference right now is Turkey. Again, cut off the oil. As long as oil continues to flow into Israel, as long as you got that lubrication for its economy, they'll continue to be able to do what they're doing. If that oil's cut off and all of a sudden they're facing a real shortage on that front, a real energy crisis, that's going to pull them up short. So I don't see any possibility whatsoever the United States taking any action that will interfere with Israel's campaign of genocide.
Do you think that Erdogan would do this? To me, it's just a blowhard. His statements are spectacular and right on point. He never follows it through.
Yeah, so far he hasn't. I mean, no, I entirely agree with your characterization of him. There's a possibility that the recent murder by the Israeli forces of this American Turkish woman, where they assassinated her, shot her in the head. I have seen the father has been on television in Turkey, speaking very passionately, condemning the inaction of the United States and calling upon the government of Turkey to do something. We'll see if Erdogan will respond to that. If he does, there's I give it the blind pig chance of finding a route. That can always happen. There's always a chance that Erdogan might end up doing the right thing in this case.
Is American intel, Ray, advising Netanyahu not to invade Hezbollah, Lebanon?
American intel really is not in that position. It's Tony Blinken who tells them they can do whatever the heck they want to do.
Well, somebody must tell them, Mossad, MI6, CIA, where Hezbollah is, how many missiles they have, how strong they are. Do they form a judgment as to whether it is prudent for the IDF to take Hezbollah on?
Yes, they do, and they tell the IDF, and the IDF pays heed, and the IDF and the rest of the forces there in their security apparatus do tell Netanyahu that. But Netanyahu comes back and says, "Didn't you watch me before the U.S. Congress? What was it, 58 standing ovation? Come on, they have to come in, especially before an election. So look, we can do what we want. We can go after Hezbollah. The Americans will bail us out." Now, he may be miscalculating there, but the smart money would, as Larry says, show that whatever they do, the U.S. administration, whichever administration, will support them full throat because of the donor class, because of AIPAC, because of the fact that the election is coming. They can't possibly do anything to appear weak in supporting Israel.
Larry, the admiral, the American admiral in charge of the Pacific Fleet, such as it is, attempted to warn or slightly threaten the Chinese general. Ambassador Freeman explained why a general is in charge of the Chinese Navy. They don't have the word admiral in Chinese. I didn't know this. But anyway, they had words with each other because one of their ships came close to ours. The Chinese told the American admiral to go pound salt. There is a dispute as to whether this is international waters or Chinese waters. Do we even have much of a Navy there? And if we do, what are they doing there?
Well, we have now ordered the USS Theodore Roosevelt that was sailing around the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, to be prepared to thwart an Iranian retaliation against Israel. Has now been ordered out of the area. It's headed back over towards Japan or China, Japan. But again, this is the United States looking for trouble. We live with this fantasy that there are no such thing as drones, that there are no such thing as hypersonic cruise missiles, that we, the United States, have an invulnerable fleet that can't be touched. And so we continue to go out and to insult and finger poke the Chinese in the chest and do everything possible to try to get them to react and to respond. And up to this point, the Chinese have been pretty measured in their response. If we turn the tables, if China was doing off the coast of California or in the Gulf of Mexico what we're doing in the China Sea, we would view that as an act of war. And yet, in our arrogance and in our hubris, we continue to behave this way around the world. And the rest of the world, frankly, I think a growing number around the world are just getting sick and tired of our pretentiousness and our sanctimonious behavior and this audacity that we think we can go out and command whoever to do whatever that we tell them to do. They're not going to put up with it. And so we haven't come to grips with that reality yet.
Ray, we began our conversation 25 minutes ago with a little bit of optimism that sanity had prevailed in the White House or the State Department or Jake Sullivan or whoever's making the decisions not to authorize the Ukrainians to use weapons, ours or anyone from the West, to strike deep into Russia. And we end with Larry's very articulate soliloquy that we are still of the belief that we can control the world, that we can go within 15 miles of China with a battleship. But if a Chinese battleship showed up in the middle of the Caribbean, we'd be going bonkers. Is there hope for change or no?
Well, there is, and I'd cite today's experience where Biden and Starmer avoided doing something really stupid and explicitly heeded. John Kirby announced that we took seriously what Putin was saying just the day before. The problem is that there are people in our administration who like to have a war with Russia. Don't blink before the prospect of nuclear weapons being used, and would like to egg this thing on. They're not going to disappear. They're around. And so the question is today, I think the saner minds prevailed. I think those are the ones in the Pentagon, as I said before. Blinken and Sullivan, this is a major defeat for them. If you look at what they're saying just 2 days ago in Kiev and elsewhere, they wanted these things to be approved. They've not been approved. And so there is some hope here. Right. Of more sanity before the election. The Ukrainians are still gonna lose before the election, but at least the U.S. might be a little bit more moderate in its response to this loss, given the fact that the equities are so deep and so strange and so important. And those equities, of course, can be spelled out by the Pentagon. And finally, maybe they're making their voice heard.
Larry, if Prime Minister Starmer and President Biden change their minds for some reason, who do the odds favor in a war between Russia and NATO?
Oh, Russia. Look, when George W. Bush walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty,
they can't beat no.
Russia seized that to build up an anti-ballistic missile defense system. That means it has a defense system, air defense system in place that can defeat any intercontinental ballistic missile, any submarine launch ballistic missile, any air launch ballistic missile.
Man, Putin told the world this. He told the world this. He didn't hide this fact. I've been telling people this. Nobody want to listen. It's no such thing as mutual assured destruction like we used to have with Russia. No. Putin one-upped us. Well, we were wasting. We were wasting all of our taxpayer money on these advanced airplanes and some of this, like the F-35, some of this shit don't even work. Trillions of dollars down the drain. More battleships, more tanks and nonsense they don't really need. Putin was spending money on their weapons. So Russia absolutely, I said this earlier, now he's telling you, can attack NATO, can attack the U.S., and if the U.S. try to strike them, they can shoot it down. They got the missile defense. We don't have the missile defense. They got the hypersonic missiles. We don't have the hypersonic missiles. They're just not telling people that. And I said it before, if Putin was us, it would already be over with. Because if we can do that to him, we would have been attacked Russia. But he keep warning them. He keep warning them.
Missile that the United States or the United Kingdom can attack Russia with. Not 100%. They don't have, but they've got a reasonable chance of shooting down most of such missiles that fired at us. Whereas neither the United States, the United Kingdom, or anybody in Europe has a single defense system capable of stopping anything that the Russians would fire at them. And I'm suggesting that I'm sure there are some military planners sitting in the Stavka and among the Russian military that know they've done the calculations, they've done the math. They could win a nuclear war. Absolutely. They don't want to, but they could win one if it comes to that. The West hasn't run those calculations. The West persists in this delusion that we are the best, that we got the strongest military in the world. And yet we couldn't stop the Houthis, okay? We couldn't stop the Houthis. Guys wearing sandals and curved knives and running around in the desert. But yet we're going to stop the Russia and the Chinese? Please. We need to get a grip on reality.
Yeah, I would just, Judge, I'd like to just add that there is still mutual assured destruction. However well the Russians are prepared to defend by their air defense, some of those missiles are sure to get through. And I think that the Russians have developed weapons short of nuclear weapons, hypersonic missiles that can do the job just as easily as long as the struggle is limited to Europe, where it is limited right now.
Right.
So I don't really think that anyone can conceive of a situation where mutual assured destruction is no longer in play. However good the Russian air defense system is, we have all those the sea-launched ballistic missiles and others that they can't possibly think that they could escape a retaliatory strike. So even though the ABM treaty is out of there, even though the INF treaty is out of there, there's still some sensible minds in the militaries of both countries that would shy away. And I think they shied away just today or yesterday from that prospect.
Gentlemen, this has been a terrific, terrific conversation.
A massive storming by the Russian armed forces on the Yuzhno-Donbasskaya 3 coal mine northeast of Ugledar has put Ukrainian forces in a very difficult situation. A large video released by Russian military correspondent on September 14, 2024, shows Russian assault troops launching a fierce assault on the mine structures and entering the area around the mine, where Zelensky's troops had been hiding for a long time, trying to defend Ugledar. However, this time the enemy troops appear to be completely surrounded by artillery and bombing attacks, and a large explosion occurred in one of the buildings of the Yuzhno-Donbasskaya 3 mine, located west of Bodyan, which was recently liberated by Russian fighters. The assault on the extreme mine, where fighting continued after the Russian assault troops landed, would be a death sentence for the fall of Ugledar. Epic footage shows artillery preparation, and then a mechanized attack with the entry of 2 Russian armored groups into the mine area to destroy the enemy. The armored groups, consisting of armored vehicles and motorized rifle units, entered from 2 sides at once, from the north and from the south, pinning down the Ukrainian positions. After a massive artillery barrage on enemy positions, the armored vehicles broke into the complex while firing and deploying troops. Soon after, 4 more armored vehicles arrived to disembark. One of them was hit by an explosive device during the advance, but with almost no losses. The advance of their comrades did not stop, and it is likely that the landing force landed there, while continuing to press the Ukrainian positions.
Revolutionary salute to Betty Jones for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, Queen. Salute.
As a result of the successful assault, the Russian armed forces managed to gain a foothold in the Yuzhno-Donbasskaya 3 mine, and currently control at least half of its territory, about 2 kilometers north of Ugledar. So far, the battle for the mine is still ongoing, but it seems that the last stronghold of the Ukrainian troops here, one of the key locations for the liberation of the town of Ugledar itself, will soon be taken, and cleared by Russian units.
Roll up that dynamite.
Nuclear war, are we all going to survive? Let's talk. Harris, whatever the case may be, not understanding the existential threat right now, the storm cloud over the head of all, you know, human life on Earth as we know it, right? So let's talk about what's going on. So the United States, the U.S. has a proxy war going on, which is getting less and less proxy, right? It's really drifting, and has for some time drifted from a proxy war wherein the U.S. Using Ukraine, using its its puppets, its junior imperial colonial partners in slash victims in Europe, has basically launched an undeclared war on Russia. This is what it is. The leaders of the U.S., they've hidden it from their the people in their country, right? What they were doing. They instigated and launched an undeclared war on Russia. They overthrew a government on the border of Russia. They set that government up. They sharpened that military tool against Russia, right? They basically indoctrinated helped to indoctrinate the people for decades of Ukraine into a very fascist ideology. They helped to strengthen the hate they have for the Russians, to arm them, to set them up to go to war with Russia in a suicidal manner, and now they're executing their plan. Okay, so that's where we are. For those of us who really understand, they overthrew the government of Ukraine. And then boom, everything was set in motion, and now there you go. Ukraine fight Russia. Will lie to the American people and tell them that Ukraine is some plucky sovereign country. No, we didn't overthrow the government. Why? They're completely sovereign and independent, and they're fighting against Russia, defending themselves against Russia. I've literally heard this: Ukraine defending themselves against Russia. And to which I always say, the United States overthrew the government and installed a puppet regime. There is no Ukraine. There's only the United States. Once we overthrew the government, the Ukraine disappeared, right? There's no Ukraine. But at any rate, so here's where we go. The U.S. gets the war started with Ukraine, and with Russia and Ukraine, and the U.S. says, okay, now we got them where we want them, and they didn't have them where they want them, and their plan fell apart. They're going to execute the sanctions package against Russia, which is going to annihilate Russia, take them out, blah blah blah. You know the story. Here we are right now. So the U.S. hadn't really planned on being where we are now. They had planned on Russia falling apart. So now that Russia didn't fall apart and Russia is in fact defeating Ukraine, they're in a position where there's not a plan here. Understand this. The U.S. empire doesn't have a plan. This is the opposite of a plan. They're putting out fires. So bottom line is Ukraine's losing. The Ukrainians, just like the Israelis, have but one hope. And it ain't much of a hope. And that is to drag the US and Europe into this war so that we can have World War III, because they're going to be destroyed. And they're hoping if they drag the US and the NATO, all of NATO into the war, that somehow Russia will be defeated, but it would be suicidal, because that would end in nuclear annihilation of all humans on Earth, including the Ukrainians. They never thought about that, including the Ukrainians. But the U.S. has created a fascist and irrational state, so the idea that they'll all die doesn't really, irrational fascists don't think like that. Anyway, So the latest thing is the irrational fascists have said, look, hey, here's a great idea. Why don't you give us your missiles and we can strike deep inside of Russia? Now, you know, they want to hit bases. They want to hit anything they can to hurt Russia, right? Anything. These are people who attack Russian civilians just because they hate Russians. What are you going to do with that missile? We don't care as long as we kill some Russians, right? They're not rational. And this is about out of a fascist, ethno-centric hate for Russia. And they'd be happy just to kill some Russians because, hey, that's what you do if you hate Russians, right? It is what the Israelis are doing with the Palestinians. They hate Palestinians and they're happy just to try to genocide them. Same principle, actually. So at any rate, so Russia has come clean. And they said, look, we've been playing this little game. And the game is a proxy game. And I know, and you know, that this is a semi-proxy war. But we know that you got people on the ground, and we know that you're using all of your technology to execute this conflict. I know it, and you know it. Let's not play games anymore. Okay. But you're stepping up to the line. And we both know that Ukraine can't fire these missiles, that you're not going to give them the technology to do it. And you're not going to allow them to do it anyway. And you're going to manage the targets. Therefore, if these missiles come whistling in to hit us, these long range missiles, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to respond and you ain't going to like it. Now, okay, so that gets all of that out of the way. And Russia said, oh, by the way, at that point, because you have to program the missiles. They're your missiles. You're buying them. You're programming them. You're utilizing your targeting technology to guide them to their target. And you're going to really have to fire them because the Ukrainians know how to fire them. So at that point, this whole proxy thing is out the window. At that point, we recognize and you recognize it's not proxy anymore, that you are literally, legitimately firing on Russia, and we will act. Now, all that gets us to where? What's Russia going to do, right? Are they going to? There's a couple of options, as Andrei Martyanov said. He mentioned that a crazy neocon named Michael Ledeen once said, every now and then you got to take some little crap hole country, I'm paraphrasing, and slam it against the wall so the rest of the world knows how badass you are, right? Paraphrasing. And one option is that crap old country is the UK, and Russia could smack Russia could smack the living daylights out of the UK. Could hit them, whether it be with nukes or conventional weapons, could sink some of their ships, could turn some of their bases to rubble, could really knock the crap out of the UK and say to the US, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? The UK is involved. The UK wants to do all of this stuff. Now we're going to throw the UK up against the wall. Now it's your turn, your move. If you decide that you're going to come in and fight with the UK, then we're going to nuke you. We're going to launch a massive, because let's face it, at that point, if the US says, all right, it's time to fight. If you're Russia, you know how this ends. So you got to begin it that way, right? In reality, if the US says to NATO, look, we know we're all going to get together and fight you. If you're in Russia, you know I got to fight all of these countries, including the US. That is an existential threat. So my best bet, right, is to let everything go from the beginning, to take the first shot, and that is to punch you with everything I got nuclear and try to launch a devastating first strike, wipe out your ability to respond. That would be the obvious thing if the US decides they're going to strike back, provided that Russia starts by slamming the UK up against the wall. Okay, then if the US says, okay, we're coming in and all of NATO is going to fight Russia, at that point, if you're Russia, your move is to launch a massive first nuclear strike and try to take them all out, rather than just wait until it slowly builds up to that and they get an opportunity to bring more stuff and do. No, you got to preemptive go for it, right? But that's under the premise that Russia decides to first slap the crap out of London and wait and see what happens. There are other options for Russia. Let's talk about the other options. I suspect that Russia would take some other options. Let me give you a couple of other options, because again, think about this before I talk about the other options. I want you to think about this. When Iran was violated by Israel in Tehran. Their sovereignty was violated. Russia, apparently, as I understand it, basically said to Iran, no, 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 please don't respond. Please don't start this major war in the Middle East, because we got a BRICS meeting coming up in October, and the real fight is economic. Everybody knows this is about economics. Everybody knows this is about the U.S. empire and its neoliberal system. Economic system, neoliberal capitalism is what it is, and that it is crashing. The whole world knows it. We all know that this new neoliberalism runs on debt, that it runs off of magic, asset-backed securities and crap like that don't even exist, derivatives and stuff like that. So that's collapsing. We got real stuff. We got a meeting in October for BRICS. What they really want to do is stop BRICS. So apparently, as I understand it, Russia went in with all kinds of electronic warfare, S-400, all kind of defensive stuff, loaded Iran up and said, look, we'll help you with massive technological upgrades for your defense if you don't attack. And apparently Iran also being quite wise was like, okay, you're right. BRICS is the real thing here. Remember, BRICS is the real deal here. This is really all about economics. And Russia and China and the BRICS countries are building an economic bloc. They know that the U.S. is crashing. They don't have to blow them to smithereens because they already know that they're going down the toilet, right? Okay, so think about this, logically speaking. If Iran's sovereignty was violated and Russia said to them, don't respond, we'll help you because the real deal is BRICS, as I understand it, then wouldn't Russia think the same thing? Because the real deal is economics. And they know that, look, the US economy, the UK economy, the German economy is going to hell, and the Russian economy is going through the roof. So do they really want to screw up BRICS and screw up their economy and kill all of their people? I think there's other options. So that being said, in the context of what happened between Iran and Russia, I suspect that if they think that way for China, if they think your sovereignty, for Iran, if they think your sovereignty was in fact violated, but there's bigger fish to fry here, wouldn't they think the same way for themselves? If they're saying to Iran, which my understanding is, hey man, October's the big BRICS meeting, we don't want to screw that up, we can do this a different way economically, then wouldn't they think that for themselves? That's why I'm saying there are other options. Let's talk about some of the other options. Option A, you play this game, I'll play this game, right? Okay, you've got Onyx missiles, which are nasty, nasty, nasty anti-ship missiles, really nasty supersonic anti-ship missiles, right? So what happens? Russia says, my understanding is that, could be wrong, but this is my understanding, that basically Russia, Yemen Ansar Allah, we call them Houthi, people call them Houthis or whatever, that at one point Russia was going to give them some pretty nasty missiles, some nasty technology, and Saudi Arabia and the U.S. were able to talk about it. But Saudi Arabia, that's OPEC plus one, very, very tight with Russia, and they didn't want that to happen. So apparently they talked Russia out of it. Okay. But I suspect a very strong option would be this. The Brits have some bases in the Middle East. The Brits have some ships in the region, right? That can be that let's just say Yemen could reach out and touch with some Onyx missiles, right? Or various missiles. And might I add this, whatever kind of missiles, what if they were caliber? Any kind of missiles for this reason. If the US is in Ukraine with their technology, their guidance, and their people firing missiles, then why couldn't Russia be in Yemen with their technology and their people firing missiles? Russia could do the same exact thing and say, okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to send some missiles to Yemen, and we're going to send some guys to help fire them. And oh, by the way, we're going to use our space-based intelligence to lock them in and to guide them into their target. And might I add, those British ships in the region, if the US, UK, or England wants to be froggy and they want to hit us at home, then we will go to Yemen. We'll say, okay, you can use these missiles. They'll reach out, touch them, and our guys will be there to help you fire them. And so now they have the same, let's use the word plausible, implausible deniability that the U.S. and the U.K. have with the Storm Shadow or ATACMS or whatever would be fired deep into Russian territory. So Russia could say, hey, well, let me see there. You guys are firing long-range strikes into our territory, and your guys are firing them, and your guys are guiding it in, and you're saying you're not involved at all, right? Yeah. Well, what do you know? The Ansar Allah, Yemen, fired some missiles and sunk some U.S. ships, and or if it's Storm Shadow missiles, sunk some British ships, and slammed some British bases. What do you know? In the same way that Ukraine has suddenly shown up with some ATACMS and missiles and some other JSAMs, whatever nasty missiles that can come hit us. What do you know? Yemen ended up with the same stuff, and they can do the same thing. So it would be an immediate response. It would be basically an identical response, and then and let's face it. Do you think Yemen would hesitate? Do you think Yemen would say, well, I don't know if we want to escalate or not? Yemen would say, oh man, let's let them fly. Let the birds fly. Birds in the air, guys. Birds in the air. That's what Yemen would say, right or wrong. So let's go with option A for Russia. Start here. Option A is Yemen gets some nasty missiles along with some Russian technical specialists and Russian guidance, and Yemen utilizes those to immediately strike and likely sink British ships or slam British bases immediately, right? Okay, so and then Russia says, hey, dude, it is what it is, man. We tried to tell you because we tried to tell you because we tried to tell you, but you didn't want to listen. So hey, now what you're going to do? Now we're on an even keel. You're going to fire some more, we'll fire some more. Yemen's going to fire more, and you know they ain't going to hesitate. Yemen could show up with S-400s. Yemen could show up with all kind of nasty stuff, right? So let's go there. That's an option, and I think that's one that Russia would consider, right? As opposed to starting, nuclear World War III. Here's another option. If I were president, and I'd probably do both, to be quite frank, but I would start with this. If I were president of Russia and you launched long range strikes, here's what I would do. Numero uno. There is an old, I forgot the guy, I think it was the W.W. Jacobs, an old short story called The Monkey's Paw, right? And it was like an old dried monkey's paw, like a rabbit's foot for luck, of all things, a dead rabbit's foot. Yay, boy, that's real lucky. Wasn't lucky for the rabbit, right? Well, this monkey's paw, in this, fable, you can ask for a wish. It'll grant you any wishes you want, but it's evil. So you'll get them in the worst possible way. So it's like, it's an old British thing. And apparently, like, there was an old man or woman, and they asked for 1,000 pounds, and which was, unthinkable amount of money. And they get a knock at the door, and the guy's there. He says, bad news, your son works at the mill, and he fell into this gigantic saw and was torn to shreds, and the payment for insurance is 1,000 pounds. Boom, right? So that's how the monkey's paw works. You ask for something, you get you get what you asked for in the worst possible way, right? Okay. That's what I'd give him I'd give him a monkey's paw response. Here's what I mean. The U.S. wants to cut Europe off from Russian energy. And the U.S. and Russia, and every time you turn around, the neocons in the EU are saying we've got more sanctions against Russia, and this country's using too much Russian energy, getting too much from Russia. So at that point, if I'm Russia, here's what I know. As Chris Rock said about drugs, he says people don't sell drugs; they offer drugs. Drugs sell themselves, right? If a person wants drugs, they're gonna go searching for the dealer. The dealer ain't gonna have to search for them, right? Okay, Russia's got a lot of, they got fertilizer, they got gas, they got oil, they got energy, right? They got uranium, they got all kinds of things that Europe needs and still buys a lot from them. Europe still buys a hell of a lot of gas and oil. The U.S. buys uranium, stuff that they really, really need that they can't get anywhere else. So if I'm Russia, I'm going to say, excuse me for yawning, okay, the U.S. has been saying, and a bunch of you guys have been saying, we really need to cut off of Russian energy. I got some good news for you. I'm going to give you what you want. Effective immediately. None. I got other customers, right? I don't sell gas. I don't sell oil. I offer it on the market, and everybody's coming to me saying, can I buy some? Can I get some? Can you give me a deal? Can you give me a discount? I got these gigantic customers in India and China who'll take all I can pump to them. All I can get to them, they'll take. I got the global south who needs all this stuff. I got wheat, all of this stuff. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you what you want. You've been saying we need to cut off of Russian energy and wheat and all of that. Effective immediately. You get none. We're still giving you a lot. Effective immediately. We'll just sell our oil. We'll sell our gas to other people. We'll sell our fertilizer. We'll sell our wheat to other people. Effective immediately. Look, you are now at war with me. I didn't ask for this. And now you're firing missiles at me. You're officially at war with me. I'm going to have to treat you like you're at war with me. Look, if your country is at war with me, if I sell you energy, you can use that in factories to build things to attack me. If I give you food, you can use that to feed the soldiers that are going to attack me. I am not going to fuel the war machine that's attacking me. So if I'm Russia, if Garland Nix is in charge of Russia, the first thing I say is, number one, everything's cut off. And I make sure that I look and I meet with my people and I make sure that I'm not going to hurt myself too bad. And I make sure that, I've set up my other customers and my other markets, which ain't hard when you're selling energy. Trust me, it ain't hard to find markets for energy, right? That's number one. Number two, yeah, even if I'm going to take a loss or take a punch, I realize something. Think about this. If you're taking a punch, if you're going to get cut with a knife, would you rather get cut here or stabbed in the heart, right? You're going to protect yourself with your hand. You don't want to get cut, but you'd rather get cut at a non-vital place. Now, certainly your wrist could get cut. Somebody could hit an artery, but it's less likely than if they puncture the area where organs are like 1/8 of an inch down and you're dead, right? So if you're going to take a punch, you want to take a punch in a less lethal area, right? So what I would look at is say, look, if I go firing missiles at you people, this could quickly turn into a nuclear war and all sides die. So I don't really win. If I'm going to have to take a hit, if this gets ugly, then, it gets out of hand and then, I could lose. Everybody loses. So what I'm going to do is this. If I got to take a hit, I'm taking a financial hit and I'm going to take it on my terms, right? If I got to take a hit, I'm going to decide what the hit I'm going to take is, and it's going to be on my terms. And here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take a financial hit by not selling you energy anymore, by not selling you things that you need. I'm going to look at the things that I provide for the EU that they need the most. And gas and oil are two of them. And I'm still providing a lot of gas and oil to them, but they need wheat, they need other things. I'm going to look at all of the things that I provide the US and Europe that are the most vital to them. And effective immediately, I'm cutting every one of them. Welcome to winter, EU. Welcome to winter. Now, there's a secondary issue here. If Russia was to say, I'm not selling my gas and oil, my energy, all these other things, I'm not going to sell them to Europe, it would destabilize the energy market. And needless to say, the prices of gas and oil would shoot through the roof, right? Number one, I don't think OPEC would be mad. You think Saudi Arabia and Oman and these other countries are going to be upset if the price of energy goes through the roof? No, they're going to make a friggin' fortune, right? So my OPEC, OPEC plus partners, they ain't going to push back on this. I'm going to say, Europe, you got to find other places, man. Now, keep in mind something, these other OPEC companies all have market. They don't have extra extra energy for they're selling to China, they're selling to India, that's already sold. So when the EU calls Saudi Arabia and say, hey man, we need a lot of oil and we need it now, Saudi Arabia is going to say, I'm sorry, but mine is all spoken for. I really don't have any excess. Number one. Number two, the prices go through the flipping roof. America wakes up and they turn their key and they drive out to the gas station and then they poop themselves like Joe Biden does every day, right? They get to the gas station and they look at the gas station and they're like, do my eyes deceive me? Or is it $14.85 a gallon? Keep in mind something. Everything in this country gets to the market by truck running off diesel fuel. If diesel fuel is $15, $16 a gallon, how much is a dozen eggs? If everything coming in, everything coming to the stores, everything being transported by train, a lot of our trains are diesel, all of this stuff, and diesel is prohibitively expensive, inflation goes through the roof and our economy starts to collapse. And we got a election coming in a month and a half. So if they fire these missiles, they're gonna have a meeting at the UN at the end of September. If I'm Russia, you have that even better. It's at the end of September, so now it's a month away from the election. And if I'm Russia, I say, you know what? I ain't trying to influence the election. I ain't trying not to influence the election. You hit me with missiles, didn't you? You launched a direct attack on me. And guess what I'm going to do? Yeah, you ain't getting any oil from me. Not my enemies. People who shoot at me can't buy energy from me. And they can't buy anything from, whatever I choose. The things that you need, titanium. They need titanium for Airbus, stuff like that. Bad news, you ain't getting it. Bad news. And what good would it do you anyway? Because you won't have the energy, and the price of energy in Europe will be prohibitively high, but there's an even worse problem because you won't be able to get it. And now here it is. All start getting cold in Europe, and the European government's got to say to the people, oh my gosh, we don't have any energy for you. You're going to freeze to death because of the decision that we made to fire at Russia. And if they would say, if I'm Putin and they call me and they say, look, we want to work a deal so we can still get energy. I slammed the phone down on their ear. Hello, sorry, wrong number. Bam. You're out of luck. You ain't getting it. Not this winter. All right, we want to work through. Yeah, sure. Okay, have a nice day. Bye. I'm not doing it. And once I make that decision and I tell them, you fire at me, it's going to be a price to pay. And the price is going to be, you ain't buying any energy from me this winter. None. And there's nothing we can do to fix it. There's no way to resolve it. There's no negotiating. There's no nothing. You figure out how to handle this winter as best you can. It ain't my problem. When you fired at me, you set that up. If I'm in charge of Russia, that's what I do. I look at the things that I provide to them. I find a list of the top 5 things that I provide to them, the things that are the most critical to their economy, which is certainly going to be gas, which is certainly going to be oil, and then other things, right? Whatever, precious metals, anything, right? And when those missiles come, storm shadows come whistling into Russia, the door slammed. And I say, that's what you wanted. That's what you got. There ain't no way to fix this. And if they try, nah. Okay, we're ready to negotiate. Nothing to negotiate about. This is done. You do. I just say, figure out how you're going to deal with it. You want to negotiate? Sure. I'm kind of busy. I'll negotiate with you next May. But I can't. My schedule's just too tied up until May. So you're going to have to figure out how to get the hell through the winter without Russian energy. It's up to you. How you do it. It's not my problem. You should have thought about this where you officially declared war on me. Okay. Think about aviation, how much planes use, how much JP5, the planes are using. So now And I also say to India, I say to China, I say to my closest allies, don't worry, guys, I'm going to continue providing you this stuff at the normal price, even though the market goes through the roof. Now, add this to my allies. They ain't got to worry about it. I'm going to sell it at my price, not market price. But month before the election, the Democrats ain't going to be happy. And am I trying to interfere with the election? No, I'm just trying to square things up. That's all. Square up, right? You punch me, I punch you back. We're square. No hard feelings. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? And even swap ain't no swindle. So guess what? You're going to do that to me. I'm going to do that back to you. Now, if you come to me and say, well, look, we need this stuff really bad. Can we talk? Yes, we can. Not a problem. I'm glad you finally came around, but I'm busy till April. You fired stuff at me. Nothing. There is nothing, no action that I'm taking that I'm willing to negotiate over until April at the earliest. You're going to have to figure out how to get through this winter. And because here's the thing, it's going to destabilize these countries. What are people going to do when people wake up and say, oh my God, the expense, oh my God, I can't afford anything? These countries are going to become unstable. There's going to be violence. They'll probably take out some of these leaders. And that's your problem. You should have thought about it before you fired at me. I don't even want to hear from you. So those are a couple of options. And I'll tell you, if I'm the president or prime minister, whatever you want to call it, of Russia, I'm definitely cutting Europe off and even if it hurts me some, it'll hurt me less than nuclear war, won't it? If I say, if I do this, it's nuclear war if I go kinetic. But so I'll go economic and it won't hurt me as bad, but God knows it's going to hurt you bad. And I ain't willing to talk about it no time soon. You took that act, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. It's the difference between crisis and consequences. This ain't a crisis. This is not a crisis at all. If you're like, people are going to starve to death in Europe and they'll freeze and they're going to go bananas. It's called consequences. But we have a crisis in Europe. You don't have a crisis. You got the consequences of your actions. I told you that I was going to act, and you decided, hey, we're just going to fire the Russians anyway. So now I acted. Figure out how to deal with it. Bye-bye. Toodles. Boom. I'm hanging up the phone. That's what I would do. Those are a couple of options. And I think we're going to look for Russia taking options outside of nuclear war. But that being said, there is no guarantee that the Russians won't. Michael Ledeen, as Andrei Martyanov says, Michael Ledeen, the UK, that Russia might not say, I'm going to knock the crap out of the UK. And let's just see what you're going to do. Barbecue a meal do. If you want to fight, let's fight. If you don't, shut up and go home. Right? Or, of course, arm Ansar Allah in Yemen. So those are some options. Now, let's go to part 2. Let's hit part 2. Here's an article. Okay. Interesting. Biden administration says RT and Russian state media are waging covert information warfare around the world. Well, here's what's interesting about that. Why? Okay. At some point, this thing's going to go up. Okay. Look, everybody knows how the U.S. does. The U.S. literally goes into countries and buys up all the media and does all kind of terrible things and wages what they call soft power world. So to those of us who understand how the U.S. wages soft power wars, this is it's ludicrous. It's absurd. But let's look into it, right? Okay. So they're saying that the U.S. uses RT and their global TV network as an arm of Moscow's spy agencies, including raising funds to buy weapons for Russian forces waging war against Ukraine. Now, first of all, Russia's selling so much oil that they don't know what to do with it. The idea that they got to use crowdfunding, buy me a coffee, you know what I mean, to raise money to buy $40 million jets. That, oh yes, what are you doing? Well, we use Patreon. Russians use Patreon because they had to buy some new caliber missiles at $1 million. It's absurd. They had to buy $100 million worth of stuff. So they raised money. What did they do? Like put somebody online to say, it's my birthday, please send me a cash app, me some money. It's ludicrous what they're saying, right? And here's what I love, citing declassified intelligence, which we'll never see. U.S. officials announced new sanctions against Russia, blah, blah, blah. They had secretly pushed out propaganda through media sites in South America, Europe, and Africa while hiding the criminal fingerprints. Here's the bottom line. For some time, the U.S. has been, the neocons have been very upset. Let me tell you a story. I was in South America at an event, and there were people from all over South America there. And when I said, oh, yeah, I do a show on Radio Sputnik, they were all showing me their phones. You know, those that couldn't speak, when they found out I had a show on Radio Sputnik, they were showing me their phones to show me that they had the RT and Sputnik app. RT and Sputnik and Russian media is very, very popular in South America, very popular in the Middle East, very popular in Africa, right? Because Russia and China are popular in those areas. So they listen to their stuff and they have a right to. So what the U.S. is saying, if you look at it, if you really look at it, here's what the U.S. is saying. Africa, South America, they don't have a right to choose the media that they want to listen to. Why Africa, and South America, you're being misled by the Russians. In other words, you poor little brown people, you don't have the intelligence. You know, the Biden administration, for all of this crap about the first black woman and we're standing up for minorities, the Biden administration is racist as hell. Right. And they're like, yes, these black people in Africa and Latin America, why they don't have the sense to choose the media alternatives other than Western media. Why Voice of America, they're just giving you unbiased information. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, totally unbiased. Why? We know they're unbiased because they literally hired former members of the DOJ and the FBI, former members of former directors of the CIA. So we know they're unbiased, right? Okay. So this is about the US, the neocons for some time that have been saying we're unhappy. They've been saying for a while. I've been reading articles for months, probably a couple of years, that have said the US is very unhappy with the popularity of RT in Latin America. Right. And of course, Sputnik and RT are opening more and more in Africa. Why? Because that's what the Africans want. They don't want this crap. They don't want CNN, MSNBC, and Fox. They want RT. They want, you know, CGTN. They want Press TV. They want alternative news. They don't want U.S. imperialism. And now U.S. imperialism is saying RT wants its new covert intelligence capabilities, like its long-standing propaganda and disinformation efforts, to remain hidden, right? That's Tony Blinken. Tony Blinken is saying that the U.S. is that Russia. No, it's not us. What do they say in psychiatry? Deny, project, attack. It's not me, it's you. And I hate what you're doing. So it's really laughable. It's really a joke that the U.S. says, basically, in a nutshell, we're trying to protect Latin America and Africa, the countries that we have genocided, that neocolonialism has stolen their stuff, robbed them blind. And even right now, these countries in Africa and Latin America are saying the US, France, neocolonialism, imperialism, we want you out. We're sick of you. We've had it. We want you to get out. So here's what's happening. African, Latin American countries are saying to the US, we want you out. We're sick and tired of you robbing us blind and regime changing our countries and murdering our leaders, right? That's what they're saying to the U.S. And the U.S. is saying, we've got to protect Africa and Latin America from Russia because they're being misled by them. And Africa and Latin America saying, get the hell out. We'll decide. So all of this is the racist, paternal kind of manner that the Biden administration and the neocons look at these countries. Well, we have to stand up for these poor little African countries and Latin American countries because they'll be misled by Russia. Really? And what do you want to stand up for? We've got to stand up and protect them from Russia so we can go in, coup their governments, overthrow their governments, murder and assassinate their leaders, and then, of course, steal all their natural resources. That's what it comes down to. This whole thing now is we want to steal their natural resources, and they're getting things, hearing things from Russia that we don't want them to hear. We only want them to hear our propaganda. And so now it is an information war. Now, you got to see that through the context of what's been happening lately, of Professor Danny Shaw being grabbed at the airport because he went to a Palestinian movie festival, right? Palestinian documentaries, movies, etc., right? What's happened to Sarah Wilkinson? What's happening to what's his name? Richard Medhurst, and on and on. You have to see this through the concept. Pavel Durov, etc. Right? This is a continuation of the information war. This is a continuation of the fascist war on alternative media that ain't going to back up. It's going to continue to go. But the thing to remember is this. These countries are getting sick of it. Yeah, they're Clarenberg, on and on and on. These countries are getting sick of it. And what have we seen with the U.S. empire? The more they fight to hold on to hegemony, the more obvious it gets to other countries in the world that they should not be as powerful as they are, because they're going to misuse and abuse that power, right? So now, the more they push back against alternative media, the more people are going to want to see alternative media. It stands to reason. So now they launched another salvo across the bow of alternative media, and people who are involved in alternative media are going to have to be prepped. They're going to have to look at what's going on, right? And they say, now listen to this, a large online crowdfunding platform operating within the quasi-intelligence state-funded RT and through social media channels is providing material support and weaponry to Russia's military units in Ukraine. Russia's making more money than it has ever made regarding oil and gas and things of that nature. Russia is cleaning up. Russia is adding Eastern Ukraine, which is going to be trillions of dollars of income. And they're doing it not to steal the money, but they're doing it for security reasons. But those people who were who are Russian-speaking people of Russian heritage, of Christian Orthodox heritage, are happy to be Russian. They voted to go to Russia. But guess what? There's a lot of gas, there's a lot of oil, there's all kind of mines, there's all kind of resources, there's wheat and fields, you name it, in Eastern Ukraine. So Russia is only—
I just played a video earlier of Russia had Ukrainians trapped in a mine. They're gonna get rid of Ukrainians and seize those resources. It's over for Ukraine.
What was former Eastern Ukraine in the new Russian regions. And the bottom line is this: Russia's only getting richer. Russia is not getting poorer. So the idea that Russia has to use an online crowdfunding platform to buy weapons is a joke. You know, only idiots are going to believe that. But the brainwashed cult of U.S. Media and U.S. politics will buy into that, but the rest of the world ain't. So what we're seeing, basically, in a nutshell, is the U.S. empire is horrified. It's frightened. It's afraid. And it's losing on all fronts. And this is one of the fronts. It's losing on the alternative media front bad. CNN, MSNBC, their audiences are literally dying. First of all, they only got old people, and the old people aren't going to be there forever. Number one. Number two, the young people are just turning completely away from the mainstream media platform and going to alternative news. And then a lot of us, the people who have been awakened during COVID, the people that have been awakened regarding what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Ukraine, the people that have been awakened about what the United States is doing in the Asia Pacific region in trying to provoke a confrontation and a conflict with China, are looking at things saying, you know, these people are mad. These people are insane. They're lunatics. They're warmongers. And a lot of Americans are starting to ask the question. They're starting to see the inextricable link between U.S. imperial worldwide warmongering policy and the decay and the deterioration of the U.S. Infrastructure and of the U.S. Workers' standard of living. So people are looking at alternative media and saying, you know what? If I turn on Jimmy Dore or whatever, or George Galloway or Garland Nixon or the Duran or whoever, I believe those people albeit that some of them are flawed, including me, are doing their best to give me the truth. And if they find out that something they're saying is wrong, I think they'll come back out and say, hey, I just said this I've seen Jimmy Dore do it. I said this last week, but I just found out that was wrong. That's what we do in alternative media. Why? Because we're trying to bring the truth. And a big part of it is this: alternative media people are doing this stuff because we enjoy doing it. We're not trying to influence the outcome of anything. Most of us are doing it because we read and we study and we find out information and we share it with our friends. We share it with our audience, which is part of our community. It's almost like community radio. We see ourselves as part of the community. And our friends in the chat and in the community are always sending us emails and information. Hey, Garland, didn't you know about this? Hey, Garland, are you aware of this? Oh, did you see this? And I'm like, holy crap, that's really good. I'm going to have to do a segment on that, right? And that's what happens in the alternative media world. There is interaction. Why? Because most of the people in the alternative media world were not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. We're not born just like what's his name? Anderson Cooper. His mother was Gloria Vanderbilt. My mother wasn't Gloria Vanderbilt. My mother was a woman who ran a school bus company. You know, if you listen to my show, my dad was a longshoreman. He wore a hard hat. These were hard-working people. My dad was in a union. These were people that got up early in the morning in the cold, and they busted their butt to make a living for their families, to provide a decent living and hopefully, ideally, provide better opportunities for their children than they had. Neither one of my parents had a high school degree. My dad had a third-grade education. And there are a lot of people in the chat right now who are saying the same thing. Yeah, I'm from fill in the blank. My parents didn't have much. My parents weren't rich. My parents weren't educated, etc. They wanted me to do better than them, and they worked hard to try to do that. And you know what I mean? So my point is, that's the kind of people that you got on alternative media. I think Jimmy Dore said his dad was a cop and he had a bunch of brothers and sisters, a big family. And let's face it, on a cop's salary, you know good and damn well they weren't rich, right? So you got alternative media who aren't, you know, a Wolf Blitzer, former AIPAC guy. You got a bunch of people who are formerly Laura O'Donnell, former spokesperson for the Bush administration. You got a bunch of people who are 1%ers, top 1%. Wealthy people born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They ain't giving you the news, my friend. And people are sick. They don't want to turn on CNN and see Anderson Cooper, and then after that see Wolf Blitzer come out and give you from the AIPAC news. No, this is the voice of the ruling elite, and people have had enough of it. And now they want RT because it's something different and it's alternative and it's not owned by the U.S. establishment, and they want to hear what they have to say. Now, do they want to hear what Garland Nixon and others have to say? And now what's happening? It's getting obvious if you look at the numbers that people are leaving alternative media in droves. And again, COVID was a big part of it. During COVID, there were people who said, I don't trust the government. And when the government says we have this particular medical policy, right? It was a public policy. There were people who said, I'm questioning that policy. I want more information on it. And when the government says you can't have information, shut up and do what I'm told, they started to wake up and say, hey, man, the government is not looking out for us. I don't trust these people. That's reality. And so now the government is waking up, seeing the deterioration of the audience of their puppets, and they're trying to react by trying to take out alternative news, by trying to, you know, control the narrative everywhere. You know, one of the arguments that they're making, the principal argument that the U.S. empire is making about RT and Russian news is this. This is literally here's what they're saying. Support for the Ukraine conflict is decaying. It's deteriorating. And the reason it's deteriorating is because Russia's spreading misinformation about the Ukraine conflict. That's what they're saying. One of the reasons I think is the election in Germany and the election in France. But keep in mind something. Like, for instance, in France, Rumble is blocked, right? All over Europe, the RT is blocked. So what you're saying is, in an area where people can't access RT, RT is providing misinformation to these people. They mostly can't access RT, and that's influencing them. Know that the people aren't smart enough on their own to look at this thing and make a determination on their own. You notice something? They don't argue against the premises that we put forward. They don't say, no, we didn't overthrow the government. When you say they overthrew the government of Ukraine, they say that's Russian talking points. They don't say, no, we did not. No, they just say that's Russian talking points. In fact, if you read a New York Times article where they talk about the FBI raiding Scott Ritter, one of the things they say that Scott Ritter was doing was pushing narratives that are favorable to the government of Vladimir Putin. So now it's a crime. If I say, first of all, think about this. I just said there is ample evidence, in my opinion, that the U.S. government overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014 and installed a puppet regime. I believe that to be true, and I believe I can demonstrate that. But according to the New York Times article, that would be information that is favorable to the government of Vladimir Putin. Therefore, the FBI can now raid my house. Hey, you're saying terrible things, such as things that would be favorable. Well, if I say, I visited Moscow and it's a beautiful city, well, that would be favorable to the Kremlin, wouldn't it? To the government of Vladimir Putin. So again, they're criminalizing, saying, yeah, I'm a Russophile. I like Russia. I love the culture. I love the food. I love the people. I love everything about Russia. I find it interesting. Not everything about Russia. I don't love everything about any country, but you may. But you're allowed to. My point is, if you like Russia, if you have an opinion that runs in opposition to the U.S. empire, or some of its junior partners in the EU, you got a right to. But apparently you don't. You don't, because they're saying you have a privilege, and they're saying you don't have a right to see damn things that we don't want you. So what they're saying is this. We don't want the Europeans and the Americans to see anything that RT has to say. And now, because Europe and America is we control, you're not going to be able to see it. Now, what we're saying is this. Africa, Middle East, these other places around the world are watching RT. They can't see them either. So we're going to do everything we can, and we're going to stop RT from being shown in Africa and Russia, etc. Why? Because in Africa and Latin America, etc. Why? Because we control those places too. We decide what's good and bad for them. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's unthinkable. But that's where we are right now. And so let me look while we're here. That's been almost an hour. I'm going to now look and see if we got any super chats. And if we do, I'll answer them. And I think
now I want to play this. This is 7 years ago. 7 years ago.
In his last major speech before presidential elections, he's almost guaranteed to win again. Vladimir Putin sounded more like his Cold War predecessors, warning of a nuclear war, showing elaborate animations of what he called invincible nuclear weapons. Like this apparently new low-flying cruise missile described as having a limitless range and unpredictable flight path, evading American missile defenses and shown targeting the United States.
7 years ago, he walked out and showed the world that he had military superiority over NATO. Fuck all the secrets, that he had military superiority over NATO and especially over the U.S. And that he could do anything he wanted to do to them. He was warning them 7 years ago. But they steady pushed.
And a long-range underwater drone tipped with a nuclear warhead.
I think we ought to take this very...
That drone, that right there should have had them asking that man for forgiveness. They should have been calling Mr. Putin after that. Because what that drone does is it wipe out a whole coastline. If that hit the East Coast is gone. If it hit the West Coast shoreline is gone. Wherever coastline it hit, and it's indefensible.
Very seriously. Vladimir Putin is a very serious leader. He has a powerful scientific establishment behind him, and several of these weapons will be game changers.
President Trump, seldom critical of Russia, didn't respond, but the White House did.
U.S. defense capabilities are and will remain second to none.
That was a lie. You see, what Putin was showing was the U.S. military industrial complex and the U.S. oligarchs, those who run this country, the elite of the elite, the 1%, they had stole all of our tax money, pretending like they had the best weapons, which was a lie. We watched them lose war after war. It's not about winning wars. It's about endless wars, like Edward Snowden said. The U.S. spends more money on weapons than Russia, China, and the top 5 put together. Think about that. But like I told you, they steal the money and pocket it. They become the richest. The weapon's not the best. And after Putin showed that he had the best weapons 7 years ago, she run out there and tell a lie. Oh, the U.S. steal the what? Now the Ukraine war done proved all of that they were saying was a lie.
And now, because of the new defense budget of $700 billion, our military will be far stronger than ever.
$700 billion. They say, oh, give us $700 billion more. We definitely will be able to beat Putin. Well, what is it looking like in Ukraine right now?
To some, it all harkens back to the duck and cover days of the American-Soviet arms race. But not everyone is convinced.
The little threat about nuclear weapons was really interesting because, boy, if there
should be locked up for Iraq.
There were an empty threat. That was it.
But the Pentagon has been warning that Russia has been developing advanced cruise missiles. Putin saying today, nobody listened to us. It's time to listen to us now. This presentation will set off a huge...
He told them, we warned you, but you wouldn't. It's 7 years ago. Now they saying they didn't know if he told them about the Kinzhal missile that's wreaking havoc in Ukraine right now. They said, oh, maybe the Kinzhal work for hypersonic, indefensible. But this is the one that they're really scared of. The most optimistic in the whole goddamn world.
Russia carried out a successful test of its RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missile as part of Zapad 2017 on Thursday night, the country's defense ministry said. The exercise known as Zapad 2017 is the latest iteration of a series of training maneuvers that began under the Soviet Union in the 1970s. After a long break following the collapse of communism, Zapad was revived in 1999 and then was expanded after Vladimir Putin became president at the end of that year. Zapad, West in Russia, used to include military forces from countries under the Warsaw Pact, the Soviet-led military alliance whose non-Soviet members have now all joined NATO. Today, the military exercise has shrunk to just 2 participants, Russia and Belarus, but is still viewed warily by military planners in the West. The rocket, also known as Satan II, was fired from the Plestic Cosmodrome and traveled 3,600 miles before hitting a target on the Kura test range. One official told the newspaper Kommersant, the main aim is to check the rocket systems at the moment of leaving the silo, the switching on of the Sarmat's first stage, and the following 5 seconds. It's been developed by Russian missile defense company, the Makeyev Design Bureau. In this video, Defense Updates analyzes why it's the most powerful missile in the world.
Come on, man, stop playing.
Number 5. The RS-28 Sarmat is due to replace the Soviet R-36M missiles, which NATO experts nicknamed Satan, meaning the devil. The R-36M was viewed by U.S. analysts as giving the Soviet Union first strike advantage over the U.S. Satan II is the name given to its more deadly replacement, that is the RS-28 Sarmat. According to the concept of MAD, mutual assured destruction, if the other side knew that initiating a nuclear strike would also inevitably lead to their own destruction, they will not initiate a nuclear strike. So basically, MAD prevents a nuclear war. As the United States and NATO are improving their ballistic missile defense (BMD) systems, MAD is getting threatened since the USA or NATO may be able to intercept Russia's current nuclear missiles like the R-36 Satan. Sarmat is being designed specifically to penetrate any current or future BMD system. It's Russia's answer to this strategic problem and will enable Russia to maintain the nuclear deterrence vis-a-vis United States and NATO. According to Russia's military, it can beat any defenses and wipe out entire countries.
Number 4.
One missile. One missile. One missile could wipe out your whole fucking country. That type of destruction.
At the end of June 2015, it was reported that the production schedule for the first prototype of the Sarmat was slipping. The RS-28 Sarmat was expected to become operational in 2016. On the 10th of August 2016, Russia successfully tested the RS-28's first stage engine named PDU-99. The first image of this new missile was declassified and unveiled in October of 2016. In May of last year, it was reported that the production process had been accelerated and that missiles would make up 100% of Russia's fixed land-based nuclear arsenal by 2021.
Number 3.
Sarmat uses liquid propellant, the exact nature of which is classified. The missile has a speed of over Mach 20.7. It weighs in at a massive 100 tons, making it the heaviest missile in the world.
That's crazy.
To give viewers a perspective, the U.S. land-based strategic missile, LGM-30 Minuteman III, has a weight of about 35 tons, approximately.
Number 2.
Speaking to Radio Sputnik, Alexei Leonov, a military expert and commercial director of Arsenal of the Fatherland magazine, provides insight about the missile. The military expert emphasized that Sarmat will serve as a reliable deterrent. Leonov highlighted the particular interest of the US and European mainstream media towards the Russian missile, which was dubbed the Devil in Disguise, Satan, and Weapons of Nuclear Hell. Leonov said, let them call it what they want. The Sarmat missile system, which is about to enter into...
Come on, man. Putin just told him today he said Britain will be turned into lava, hot lava. Come on, man. He talking about hitting them with this.
Service is a 5th generation system. Its characteristics are so impressive that our opponents have a reason to be afraid of it. According to some estimates, the missile's striking range is up to 18,000 kilometers. That's 11,184.6 miles. It also has a large number of divided parts from 10 to 15 warheads, each with a capacity of up to 750 kilotons. They will fly to their target at hypersonic speeds, performing maneuvers so that the existing American missile defense system could be incapable of intercepting them. Little Boy atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of 15 kilotons of TNT. Sarmat's cumulative explosive power will be 15 warheads multiplied by 750 kilotons. That's around 11,000 kilotons of TNT. The Russian news outlet Sputnik reported in May that an RS-28 rocket is capable of wiping out parts of the Earth the size of France or Texas. And by these figures, it seems that the analysis is correct. Leonov expressed his confidence that the Krasnoyarsk machine building plant will hit its deadline and Sarmat will enter service on schedule.
Number 1.
Land-based missiles are vulnerable to preemptive strikes, and hence Russian experts are going to great lengths to shield it. The Sarmat silos will be protected by active protection measures, including 100 guns capable of firing a metallic cloud of 40,000 30-millimeter bullets to an altitude of up to 6 kilometers. The Russians are also planning to protect the Sarmat with the new S-500 air defense systems. S-500 system can detect incoming ballistic missiles or aircrafts at a range of 2,000 kilometers. It's designed to intercept them at a range of 500 to 600 kilometers. Finally, the missile's preparation to launch is under 60 seconds, utilizing a highly automated launch system. In all, the Sarmat will be the best protected, silo-based intercontinental ballistic missile ever put into service worldwide.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe.
If this is what they want. If this is what they're really looking for, keep it up. Keep talking tough.
Speaking of Russia fanaticism pervading the United States and its legal framework, one of the things that I think got too little attention in terms of a massive escalation of censorship in the West was soon as Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 and Europe and the UK and the US and NATO got involved in that war, the EU, as I've said many times before, made it a crime, made it illegal to platform RT or Sputnik or any other Russian state media. So if you're a European citizen and you know that your government is funding and financing this war and you want to hear from the other side, you can't, because the government made it illegal for you to even hear that. Which, as I've explained before, is why Rumble is not available in France, because the French government said, we see that you're violating our law by still platforming RT and Sputnik, and you need to remove that immediately. And when Rumble said no, the French said, we're going to cut you out at the IP level then. Continuous attempts to demand censorship of every government in the world as a condition for allowing citizens to access the information they want to seek. Now, the US government today is announcing something very similar with regard to RT. It's announcing essentially that they are now trying to engineer a worldwide ban on RT. Just prevent any of that information from getting anywhere. And I thought it was very interesting what the State Department spokesman who announced it explained was the rationale.
I want to thank Kerry Gu sitting in the back of the room and all the people at the GEC. This is something that's been put together over many, many, many weeks and months. And a lot of people put their heart and soul into this sort of work to be able to get it available to you in all these details so that you can then question me and Jim about cats and crowdfunding. But this is going to be a long-term campaign. And that's the point of the analogy to Huawei. That's something that began under the Trump administration, continued on the Biden administration. We are going to be talking, the secretary will be talking, the president will be talking, assistant secretaries of state like Jim, and especially his colleagues in Latin America and Africa and Asia are going to be working with their colleagues to try to show all of those countries that right now broadcast with no restriction or control RT.
Do you hear what's wrong with RT? They have broadcasting with no restrictions or control. That's what's wrong with RT. Same thing wrong with social media, with X, with Rumble, with TikTok. They allow free speech. They allow information to be disseminated with no constraints or restrictions. And then he goes on to add what the real problem with RT is that they have.
RT and allow them free access to their countries, which I do believe, unfortunately and sadly, has had a deleterious effect on the views of the rest of the world about a war that should be an open and shut case.
I mean, it's incredibly dumb. I haven't seen this before, but it's incredibly dumb to come out and just admit that the reason you're trying to shut down RT is because it has had an effect on convincing much of the world to turn against the war in Ukraine. And so you want to cut off the source of that dissent because you want to make sure the world just submits and agrees with and applauds whatever wars the United States wants to get involved in. It's really quite an admission, especially because the idea of the First Amendment in the United States doesn't just mean you get to say what you want. It also means you get to read what you want, including foreign propaganda. We talked about that with the bin Laden letter and how offensive it is should be to every American, even if you despise the bin Laden letter and think it's worthless, to be told that you can't read that because it's been banished online, that the government, that journalists pressured The Guardian to remove it from their website and to then pressure TikTok to ban any discussion of it. When we had Brendan Carr of the Federal Communications Commission on earlier this week, I asked him about that, and he did talk about, even though he is an advocate of banning TikTok, the Supreme Court precedent where they have said that access even to foreign propaganda is the right of Americans. Not even in the Cold War, which, remember, we regarded as an existential threat with the Soviet Union. We went to many, many wars, many proxy wars, almost blew up the world twice over it. It was the consuming, driving policy that shaped what the United States was from the
late 1940s after World War II, where we were aligned with Russia, where the national security state was created with the National Security Act of 1948, all the way through the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s. That was the primary focus of the United States as a country, as a culture. Even then, we didn't ban Russian state media. You could go and read Pravda if you wanted to. We heard from Russian leaders all the time. Richard Nixon did a very famous debate that I would actually really encourage you to watch on YouTube. The famous kitchen debate that he conducted with Nikita Khrushchev, where Richard Nixon advocated for capitalism and Nikita Khrushchev argued for communism. And they just had an open debate that was broadcast on television. So you could hear, there was no sense of, oh, we have to keep Russian propaganda away from you. But we are now in a world where this is so normalized that the minute we identify, the government really, not we, the government identifies information that they think is harmful, that they think is convincing you of things they don't want you to think, the instinct is to immediately go to the source of it and try and suppress it, try and censor it, try and break it, so that the only information the world is hearing is the government's information or people aligned with the US government's view. Here's the, yeah, and by the way, there were millions of people around the world watching RT before it was taken off YouTube, and there still continues to be millions of people around the world who watch RT on cable and all kinds of countries around the world. That's what the US government is so concerned about. Here from the US State Department, they were actually much more clever in how they tried to justify it than that spokesman was, who just admitted, like, sadly, RT has had the effect of getting a lot of people to turn against the war in Ukraine. Now, let me just say, living in a country, Brazil, where the government is absolutely opposed to the NATO war in Ukraine, the Brazilian government has repeatedly refused to provide any help or assistance. Even the German chancellor came to Brazil and met with the Brazilian president, Lula da Silva, and asked for a certain technology that is necessary for the German tanks that they wanted to send to Ukraine. And even on that, the Brazilian government said, we're not getting involved in this war in Ukraine. That's not our war. We're going to keep our resources focused on the lives of our citizens. We're going to spend money and resources to fuel the NATO war in Europe, and lots of leaders, including Lula, but around the world, have said that they regard this as NATO's fault. This isn't because RT has brainwashed them. It's because, just like those Black socialist activists, over decades, there's been an ideology and an understanding and a framework of how to understand the world. But just like Democrats instantly blame their 2016 loss on Russia, so too does the US government blame the fact that so many people have turned against their war on the Russians as well. Here's the announcement by the State Department announcing the attempt to ban RT. Quote, alerting the world to RT's global covert activities. This was published just today. Quote, today the United States is designating 3 entities and 2 individuals for their connections to Russia's destabilizing actions abroad. According to new information, much of which originates from employees of Russian state-funded RT, formerly Russia Today, we now know that RT moved beyond being simply a media outlet. It has been an entity with cyber capabilities. It is also engaged in information operations, covert influence, and military procurement. These operations are targeting countries around the world, including in Europe, Africa, North and South America. The United States, please believe us, the United States supports the free flow of information. We're not taking action against these entities and individuals because of the content of their reporting or even the disinformation they create and spread publicly. Perish the thought, we would never do that. We're taking action against them, they said, for their covert influence activities. Covert influence activities are not journalism. Do you think the United States has ever worked with media outlets or still works with media outlets or has US-funded media outlets that disseminate American propaganda in other countries? Do you think they might be doing that too? Quote, the United States will always stand for freedom of expression, always, including with those with whom we disagree. We encourage dissent, open debate, and free discourse. We love those things. But we will not stand for attempts by state actors to carry out covert activities with the goal of hijacking that discourse. Consistent with General License 25F, these targets may continue to engage in journalism and media operations that are not prohibited by U.S. sanctions, of course, determined by the U.S. government. Now, the little obedient puppies in London, the UK government that always follows along immediately, they don't even wait a day to jump and obey. They announced that they were going to immediately obey what they were told to do by the State Department. Here from the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office today is the official statement on RT, FCDO statement following U.S. attribution of RT to Russian state. A FCDO spokesman said, quote, the UK supports the US in their assessment that RT is not only a state-funded propaganda house, but deliberately working to undermine our collective security on behalf of the Kremlin. Already a mouthpiece for Russian disinformation, RT has mutated into an altogether more harmful organization. Alongside its public lies and disinformation, RT has also used proxy outlets under the guise of independent media to disseminate false pro-Kremlin narratives, such as that Russia is winning the war in Ukraine, that the NATO war is highly provocative and destabilizing, that kind of pro-Kremlin narrative, that the Ukrainians are resisting going to the draft because they don't want to fight as cannon fodder in a war that they can't win, those kind of pro-Kremlin narratives. Quote, together with our international partners, we have already taken strong measures to prevent RT from achieving its pernicious objectives, sanctioning its parent company TV Novosti, and working to restrict its influence. We will continue to bear down on those who would threaten our collective security and democratic values. I love so much when censorship is justified in the name of having to uphold democratic values. As I said, that every time there's censorship in Brazil, it's immediately justified as the need to protect Brazilian democracy. When we heard the Australian communications minister last night justify why they were going to punish big tech companies for not censoring what they regard as disinformation, she said it's necessary to protect Australian democracy. And of course, that's the view of the United States and the Europeans as well. Okay, here's just to give you a sense, an article from June of 1973, very much at the height of the Cold War. This was under the Nixon administration. Leonid Brezhnev was the Soviet leader. And here's the New York Times publishing, quote, the text of the Soviet party leader's television address to the American people. So even back in 1973, there was no attempt to keep Russian perspective, Russian government perspective away from the American people. To the contrary, American media outlets wanted Americans to hear from them. And they printed the entire text. And it was a letter specifically to Americans, just like the bin Laden letter. Nowadays, you couldn't publish something like this, as The Guardian proved when they removed the bin Laden letter. But back in 1973, again, at the height of the Cold War, when the US and the Soviet Union were existential enemies, we didn't have that kind of censorship that we're seeing today. Dear Americans, said the letter, I highly appreciate this opportunity of directly addressing the people of the United States as my visit to your country. I would like, first of all, to convey to all of you the greetings and friendly feelings of millions of Soviet people who are following with great interest my visit to your country and our talks with President Nixon, and who are looking forward to this new Soviet-American summit meeting, making fruitful contributions to better relations between our countries and our stronger and stronger universal peace. Then it went on to detail everything that Leonid Brezhnev, the Soviet leader, said. And as I said, you could read Pravda, you could buy Pravda, and other Russian state media, Soviet state media, because that's what a free country offers to its adults, the right to read whatever it wants. They want, even what propaganda or the views of the bad foreign countries, at least that used to be a right. Now, at the very same time, the very same week that the US government is working to shut down RT globally, as Responsible Statecraft reported on September 11th, just 2 days ago, quote, the House passes $1.6 billion to deliver anti-China propaganda overseas. Quote, somehow it's a crime when Russia does it to us, but good, quote, information ops when we want to discredit Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative worldwide. And it basically describes how the US State Department is now going to fund, quote, independent media to combat what they call the propaganda of media all over the rest of the world. A state media, basically. And as we demonstrated before, the celebrated site Bellingcat that does propaganda all the time for the CIA and for US wars, despite being heralded as and even given awards for greatness in independent media, are funded by the CIA's arm, the National Endowment for Democracy. There you see the Bellingcat's funding. We did a whole show on this.
They also get income from governments, as you see at the bottom, including the EU. They're funded by foreign organizations. And here is the funding and partnership page of Bellingcat from this year. Bellingcat currently receives grants from the following organizations. And there you see the EU. The EU funds Bellingcat. And so as we say that state media is toxic, that we can't allow it, that we can't allow Americans to hear from it, we are at the same time funding exactly that sort of media of ourselves through the State Department and the National Endowment for Democracy. All right. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Our group, often called the Uhuru movement, on charges that they were acting as Russian agents. Now, we've interviewed the lawyer for the defendants in that case. We've interviewed the defendants. We have had experts on. We've covered it at length. Very few other media outlets have covered it. One of the only ones that did during the actual indictment was Tucker Carlson, who put the head of this Black socialist group on his program and has talked about this prosecution so much because it's so obviously an attempt to criminalize free speech, free political speech in the United States, particularly when it comes to dissenting against U.S. policy toward the war in Ukraine. These are not people who just out of nowhere started opposing the war in Ukraine as though it were inconsistent with their lifelong ideology because they were being paid by the Russian government. They weren't being paid by the Russian government. And they were advocating exactly what you would expect them to. There's all kinds of people that come out of the Black radical left-wing movement in the United States, and they would never, ever dream of endorsing a NATO war in Europe against Russia. It would be inconceivable. That would be what would be suspicious, is if they actually supported that war. These are people come out of the 1960s tradition of people like Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and people like that, and they have had as one of their primary leading views, the defining, shaping views of their group, the fact that militarism inside the United States, the military-industrial complex, endless war, imperialism are not only immoral and destructive in their own right, but deprive American citizens, and particularly poor people and Black people, which is what they focus on inside the United States as well. And yet the States government saw them advocating against the war in Ukraine. It's a tiny little group. Most people have not even heard of this group. I hadn't before I started covering this case, so it's not like they're having some huge effect on internal and domestic opinion in the United States. And they were able to find very trivial transactions between people in Moscow who never told this group they were with the Russian government, who the US government alleges had a connection to the Russian government, talking about $1,000 here, $700 here for an event, for some sort of ad. And just based on that alone, they brought a federal indictment full of felony charges, accusing them of being undeclared Russian agents, criminally spreading propaganda inside the United States on behalf of a foreign government. About two of the defendants were 81 years old, which is the leader of the group, another who was 79 years old, who have spent their entire life doing things like this. So we've been covering the criminal proceeding as it has evolved. And then earlier this week in Tampa, the trial concluded, and then a jury returned a verdict where they acquitted all four of the defendants on the most serious charge, which was acting as an agent of the Russian government to spread pro-Russian propaganda inside the United States. But it did convict them on a charge of conspiracy, conspiring to act with Russian agents, which I presume means that they thought about doing it, they talked about doing it, but they never actually became Russian agents. But even the attempt to become one was somehow itself a crime. But it's a much less serious crime. The jury did not find that they were Russian agents. That's the crux of the case. Here's the New York Times version of events. The headline was, "Activists convicted of conspiring to act as Russian agents." Quote, "The four defendants were acquitted of the more serious charge of failing to register as Russian agents. The case in Florida offered a window into Russian influence operations. Quote, an unusual federal trial detailing the inner workings of a Russian influence operation in the United States ended on Thursday with jurors convicting four members of a Black Power group of conspiring to act as agents of the Russian government. The defendants were acquitted of failing to register as Russian agents, a more serious charge. So there's really no coherence in this jury verdict. The defendants already said we're going to appeal it, but of course they're celebrating the fact that the jury did not find that they ever acted as Russian agents. And the only charge on which they were convicted, this conspiracy charge, though theoretically providing up to 5 years in prison, is very unlikely to provide anywhere near that. The New York Times article goes on, quote, prosecutors had argued during the week-long trial in Tampa that the defendants had engaged in a 7-year conspiracy to sow division in American politics. I had always thought the purpose of the free speech clause and a free press was to create division by challenging things that the government was saying, by convincing people that government leaders were corrupt or lying or acting with ill motives. A unified, homogenized country, by definition, can never be free. Quote, the defendants countered that the government was trying to criminalize their support of Russian ideology, which they argued was protected political speech. Speaking after the verdict on Thursday, 3 of the defendants and their lawyers said they considered the acquittal on the more serious charge to be a victory. They also vowed to appeal the conviction on the lesser charges. Quote, the most important thing is they were unable to convict us of working for anybody except Black people, said Amali Yeshitela, the chairman of the Uhuru movement, said on the courthouse steps, according to the Tampa Bay Times. That's the leader of this group that I interviewed, that Tucker Carlson interviewed, several other people have. Nowhere near enough, given how sinister this case is and how it's intended to chill the exercise of free speech. He added, quote, but I am willing to be charged and found guilty of working for Black people. The Uhuru movement is the activist arm of the American People's Socialist Party, an organization promoting Black power. The groups are based in San Francisco, Florida, and St. Louis. For decades, the Uhuru movement has protested issues like racism, colonialism, and policing. When the Justice Department indicted these 4 individuals as part of this Black radical left-wing group for the crime of opposing the war in Ukraine, the Department of Justice, it was in April of 2023, posted this press release about what they were doing. Quote, U.S. citizens and Russian intelligence officers charged with conspiring to use U.S. citizens as illegal agents of the Russian government. Quote, a federal grand jury in Tampa returned a superseding indictment charging 4 U.S. citizens and 3 Russian nationals with working on behalf of the Russian government and in conjunction with the Russian Federal Security Services, FSB, to conduct a multi-year foreign malign influence campaign in the United States. That's the charge on which they were just acquitted. Among other conduct, the superseding indictment alleges that the Russian defendants recruited, funded, and directed U.S. political groups to act as unregistered illegal agents of the Russian government and sow discord and spread pro-Russian propaganda. The indicted intelligence officers in particular participated in covertly funding and directing candidates for local office within the United States. Additionally, in a separate case out of the District of Columbia, a criminal complaint was unsealed charging Russian national Natalia Berlinova with conspiring with an FSB officer to act as an illegal agent of Russia in the United States. Quote, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service allegedly weaponized our First Amendment rights, freedoms Russia denies its own citizens, to divide Americans and interfere in elections in the United States, said Assistant Attorney General Matthew G. Olson of the Justice Department's National Security Division. Quote, the department will not hesitate to expose and prosecute those who sow discord and corrupt U.S. elections in service of hostile foreign interests, regardless of whether the culprits are U.S. citizens or foreign individuals abroad. Now, we covered the case where there was an indictment unsealed last week by the Justice Department, where they accused a company of posing as an American company in order to pay several right-wing influencers such as Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson, who worked for this organization called Tenet Media. They apparently were paid a lot of money. The indictment itself says that they had no idea that they were actually getting paid by anyone connected with the Russian government. And so there's no indictment possible of them, nor of presumably Tenet Media. The people who were indicted were the people with RT and other people who had organized this, engineered this system. But everything about this, of course, as we're approaching the 2024 election, is all about rejuvenating this narrative about Russia interfering in our sacred democracy and in our election. It's what they did in 2016. It's what they did in 2020, right before the election then, when they called the Hunter Biden reporting based on the Hunter Biden laptop Russian disinformation. It's obviously no coincidence that right before the election, the Biden Justice Department is trying to scare everybody about Russian influence again. One of the few programs that covered it, surprisingly, actually, this indictment was Democracy Now! In June of 2023, because usually that show is fanatically embracing of Russiagate and all of the Russia paranoia. They interviewed, I believe, the leader of the group or one of the defendants. Yeah, the leader of the group, the same person we interviewed who was a defendant, and here's what he said.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Well, the federal indictment of Donald Trump is making headlines around the world today. We end the show looking at another federal indictment that's received little press attention. In April, the Biden administration charged 4 U.S. citizens from a Pan-Africanist group with conspiring with the Russian government to sow discord in U.S. elections. Amali Yeshitela, chair of the African People's Socialist Party, faces charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, along with Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, and Augustus Romain Jr. 3 Russians were also named in indictment unsealed by the Justice Department. This follows a violent FBI raid on the activists' properties in Missouri and Florida last summer. African People's Socialist Party has been a longtime advocate for reparations for slavery, a vocal critic of U.S. foreign policy. Amali Yeshitela joins us now, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, located in St. Louis, Missouri. Amali, thanks for joining us again. We spoke to you after the FBI raid on your house in St. Louis. If you can now talk about the indictment, your response to what the government is alleging.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say we have to stop meeting like this. I think the first time we met was after the government attacked our Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1996, 300 strong. And then we've talked subsequent to that, the July 29th attack on the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida, and as you mentioned, my home in St. Louis, Missouri, as well as offices and homes of our party members in 2 states, St. Louis and in St. Petersburg, Florida. So as you mentioned, the indictment happened after something like 9 months after we were characterized as unindicted co-conspirators in some plot with the Russians, who it is said that we served in fighting around the questions of reparations and fighting to bring the United States before the United Nations for the crime of genocide against African people, and for our differences with the United States in terms of the Ukraine war.
I mean, you can just take one look at this guy and just listen to what he says, and you know exactly what he is. This is what he's been doing his whole life. He's a political activist on behalf of this left-wing ideology. Obviously, it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. It doesn't make the slightest difference. He considers himself a Black Power advocate, as I said, that comes out of this sort of Black Panther movement of the 1960s and Malcolm X and those kind of teachings. And all of those Black left-wing activists, Black Power activists and the like in the 1960s were vehemently opposed to the American war machine because they were shaped by the Vietnam War. And even Martin Luther King got around in 1968 or 1967, actually, the year before he was murdered, 1 year to the date before he was murdered, when he spoke at Riverside Church. And he apologized for and he said, for a long time, I thought that all I could do was focus on racism and racial inequality and civil rights here in the United States. But I've come to realize, and he said, too late, but I have come to realize that there can be no domestic progress until the war machine and imperialism are reined in and we stop endless war, because until we do that, we're going to be a country that just pours all of its resources into arms manufacturers that's devoted to destroying people, to extinguishing populations, and not to improving the lives of our citizens at home. And that's what this group is all about. They also advocate reparations and they have always been opposed to the U.S. government's foreign policy. That's, you wind them up, and they are opposed to the U.S. foreign policy. Foreign policy. So the idea that they needed Russian money, or that they only started sowing discord. These are radicals. That's what they do. They sow discord. That's their purpose. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they've always been doing. Because you find a very trivial connection with people in Moscow who you claim are somehow connected to the Russian government or Russian intelligence, and then you charge them as Russian agents. Just gives you a sense of how extreme the U.S. government has become when it comes to anything regarding Russia. And again, I think the idea here is to signal to other people, look, if you think about sowing discord in the United States, if you think about challenging our foreign policy with respect to Russia, or really, if you agitate for any kind of policy that we regard as destabilizing, and we can find even a tiny amount of money where you were connected to somebody we can claim was part of a foreign government, we're going to indict you as being foreign agents of that government. And that, as I said, is the charge on which they were acquitted. We interviewed the leader, Molly Yashtala, back in February of this year, and here's part of what he told us. In cases like the one that you're currently involved in, where the question is somebody acting as an agent of a foreign government? Typically, when I think of someone who's acting as an agent of a foreign government, that to me is somebody who's like a lobbyist, somebody who's saying things that they don't believe because they're being paid to say them or to work on behalf of a foreign government. In this case, in the case of your advocacy against U.S. involvement in Ukraine, or even your advocacy where you end up siding on the side of Russia in certain controversies, do you see that as consistent with the activism and ideology that you've been pursuing and defending for decades?
It's very much consistent with it. The fact is that that it's very disingenuous for the United States government to charge us of not having agency, that we're working on behalf of a foreign government. The fact is that I was in Belfast, Ireland in 1983, and working in solidarity with the Irish people in opposition to British colonialism. I was in Nicaragua at the time of the Reagan inauguration in opposition to U.S. policy, in solidarity with the people of Nicaragua, who had just won their freedom despite the policies of the United States government. In fact, it was a time of extreme turmoil that even changed some policies of the United States government in terms of how it would characterize people like me who were talking about freedom, and had determined that people who were engaged in struggles like in Nicaragua and El Salvador that had emerged would no longer it wouldn't be tolerated in terms of calling them freedom fighters. They would be characterized as terrorists. And so I was in Spain, invited to speak in Spain by an NGO that was supported by the Spanish government. I was there in 2007. And when I spoke there, I spoke also in opposition to U.S. policies that were impacting on peoples around the world. I was invited to speak at Oxford Union, and I spoke there in 2019. And I opened my presentation in 2019 expressing solidarity with the government of Venezuela that at the time was being challenged by United States policy as well. So this is historically what we've been about. And so this whole notion that somehow we become an employee of Russia because I visited Moscow and got marching orders, from Moscow at that point. That's been responsible for the fact that we ran and participated in elections, not gun battles, but elections. Participated in elections in St. Petersburg, Florida, for mayor, for city council, 2017, 2019. We ran candidates on reparations and things like that, that suddenly we are learning is a consequence of a relationship to Russia and not due to the agency of Black people. And even the whole nonsense about Russia hiring us to talk about genocide. I mean, we held a convention, a tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States in 1982 in New York City and used international law as a basis for that. And one of those laws was the UN Convention on the punishment and on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide. So it's disingenuous. There's nothing that we're doing now that we haven't been doing for the last 50 years.
Yeah, I remember when Tucker Carlson interviewed him and he put him on his primetime Fox show. He told his Fox audience, hey, I want you to hear from this 82-year-old black leftist radical because he's just been indicted on these unbelievably dubious charges as a Russian agent, criminally acting on behalf of Russia. I remember Tucker saying on there that, you know what, I'm sure I don't agree with this guy much, but actually come to think of it, I'd probably really love to have dinner with him. And maybe we actually do agree on more than I would suspect. And I think the reason why Tucker found this case so enraging and therefore appealing to cover was because, as I said, you just listen to this guy speak. And you just, it's so easily recognizable what he is. He was in Nicaragua in the 80s.
We indigenous.
He was, traveling the world on behalf of left-wing causes, protesting American imperialism and militarism his entire life. He's 2 or 3 years older than Joe Biden. He's 81 or 82 years old. So actually maybe a year older than Joe Biden. I think he's 82 now, which imagine Joe Biden speaking this coherently in such a focused way for so long about pretty complex issues. Congratulations to him on that. But I think what makes this so offensive, just, as he said, was this is what I've been doing my whole life. This is what my whole life is about. Now, suddenly, the only reason why I'm talking about reparations or opposing NATO imperialism is because the Russians ordered me to. I'm an agent of the Russian government. I have to take marching orders from Russia. He's been doing all of this through the 70s, through the 80s, at the height of the Cold War, through the Nixon administration, the Ford administration, Jimmy Carter, the Reagan administration, and Bush, and Clinton, and Bush and Cheney.
Standing against these wars.
He was fine.
Standing with allies.
And now we suddenly arrive at this moment in our history
I'm the only one.
where we're even more obsessed with and fanatical about Russia than we were at the height of the Cold War, as we're about to show you. And suddenly at the age of 82 or however old he is, he gets charged with suddenly acting as an agent of the Russian government because he's sowing discord inside the United States. All right, let's listen to the rest of this. You can go back decades, of course.
Crime of genocide. So it's disingenuous. There's nothing that we're doing now that we haven't been doing for the last 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre, you can go back decades, of course, to the Cold War, and it found its most disgraceful expression in the McCarthy era, where the U.S. government, the U.S. security state would routinely accuse American citizens who dissented from the war policies of the U.S. government of being somehow in cahoots with the Kremlin or disloyal or an agent of the Kremlin. And it's really bizarre to watch that be rejuvenated, even after the ideology of Russia has changed so radically, albeit often by the Democratic Party, the kind of neoliberal order. Just this week, we saw a suggestion from Nancy Pelosi that anti-Israel or pro-Palestinian protesters might be somehow connected to the Kremlin, and they ought to be investigated. This kind of paranoia that we hadn't seen for decades. So to me, that's the point. Now, in addition to interviewing the chairman of the movement, we also interviewed their lawyer to talk about some of the legal aspects of this case. And I think the beyond the legal issue, and we're going to show you what the lawyer said because I think it's so important, especially given this acquittal, is the kind of discourse and cultural reflex this demonstrates. It has become almost reflexive in the discourse of American liberalism to just anytime you hear anyone challenging your party, challenging your leaders, challenging your ideology, opposing the politicians that you follow, to just instantly accuse people of being a paid agent of the Russian government, to being a Kremlin asset. We've shown you so many times how often that's happened to so many people. Remember when Hillary Clinton accused Tulsi Gabbard of that for daring to run against her in 2016? And how everybody who had any kind of prominent platform who opposed the NATO war in Ukraine was put on an official list of the Ukrainian intelligence agency, accusing us of being Russian propagandists. I know I ended up on 4 or 5 of those official lists, at least myself. but just in general, that's just now baked in to the way Democrats and liberals think about the world, which is so ironic, because in the sort of left liberal civil libertarianism in which I was raised, that kind of formulated my very initial views when I was much younger, the McCarthy era was considered to be, after, say, the internment of Japanese Americans, probably, and you can go back to the 1917 Espionage Act, but certainly one of the top worst infringements of free speech rights, of free thought thinking rights, of civil liberties, because it wasn't that there were no communists in the government, there were. The point was that Joseph McCarthy routinely accused people of being Russian agents because of their political views without the slightest evidence, and ruined their lives with ease all the time. He constantly carried around a briefcase in which he claimed that the evidence proving they were Russian agents was in his briefcase, but he could never show it. These people were never charged with crimes. They weren't convicted, but they had their lives ruined, their reputations destroyed. They ended up blacklisted because everyone was petrified of working with them once Joseph McCarthy branded them a Russian agent. And of course, most of the people whom he targeted were in the Democratic Party, were on the left wing, or the left liberal flank of the Democratic Party. And that was why in 2016, when I watched Democrats and liberals embrace the same exact script, and now 8 years later do it, certainly longer than McCarthy was able to do it, and with a lot more fervor, just everybody is a Russian agent. Here's people who want reparations and who went to Moscow and opposed the war in Ukraine. Let's put them in jail as Russian agents. It's not only embedded in the culture now, but also in the law. So here's the interview we did with Leonard Goodman, who is the lawyer who represented these 4 defendants, or I think 3 out of the 4. And he talks here about the legal components of this case.
I could just mention one other thing about the indictment, that, it also charges that they're spreading Russian propaganda and disinformation. So that seems to completely contradict the finding that this is content neutral, or this has nothing to do with speech. And the one interesting thing is, in the motion to dismiss, we cited, we looked at their speeches and cited articles by Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs that say the exact same thing in different ways, but basically the exact same thing about the United States involvement in Ukraine, which is something that's named in the indictment, that our advocacy, or our complaint that the United States was involved in provoking this war. So we cited those articles, and the government's response was to say that, well, when we say disinformation, that doesn't mean it's not true. It could still be true, but it's basically Russian tradecraft, and they intend to call experts to say, basically Russia experts, to say that even though it's truthful information, it still benefits Russia, and we're still doing Russia's bidding. So it's quite bizarre. It's almost Alice in Wonderland to basically say disinformation. If you look it up, it means false information, but not according to the government in this case.
Well, that's why I think this case is worth so much attention, because that is becoming one of the most pervasive tactics. Of course, this word disinformation is being used to censor the internet. And what it's really being used to do above all else is criminalize dissent. Exactly as you said, the minute you oppose U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine, which obviously advances the interests of the Russian government, regardless of whether or not that's your intent, they regard you automatically as a Russian propagandist. And if there's anyone who believes that this prosecution would have been brought if this party had, instead of opposing U.S. support for Ukraine, opposed U.S. support for Ukraine, been cheering for U.S. support for Ukraine, I can't imagine the level of naivete and or dishonesty necessary to believe that. I mean, this is just a theme that is actually pervading so many things that happened. Just last night, we covered the Australian government's intention to start imposing massive fines on big tech companies if they don't remove what the government considers to be disinformation, and to do it in advance. This is everything that governments dislike, that Western governments dislike, is now deemed disinformation. Increasingly, it's becoming criminalized, and already it's something that cannot exist on the internet. That's why X no longer exists in Brazil, because things that a single Brazilian judge called disinformation or fake news wasn't immediately taken down, and that's considered a crime. And this is the framework that is pervading now, not just our rhetoric and discourse the way it was in 2016 through 2018, 2019, with Russiagate being the obsessive focus, but also increasingly the law, and not just the law in the West, but the law here in the United States. So I'm glad this group and the defendants who stood trial were acquitted of the main charge. And I should add that last week, Jill Stein went to, the Green Party candidate, went to this trial and spoke up in defense of this group and denounced the prosecution as an attack on free speech. And of course, she was instantly accused by leading Democrats of cavorting with Russian agents, even though they hadn't even been convicted of that crime and have now have been acquitted of it. So it's in the DNA now of the Democratic Party, the liberal establishment, but also increasingly the laws and regulation of online speech throughout the West. So we'll probably have hopefully one of those defendants on next week, but I'm sure we'll have the lawyer on to talk about what this verdict exactly was and where they go from here. Thanks for watching this clip from
field, which is very interesting in itself. This is WW3. We have scientists making what they're calling a major breakthrough here in terms of a nuclear fusion device in China that could change the future of clean energy. This is the HL3 tokamak, and it's pretty much an artificial sun. It uses plasma that they heat to 120 million degrees to create nuclear fusion. And this produces about the same amount of energy that you're going to get out of a star, the average star. And they've been trying to get this down for decades. And nuclear fusion is a source of clean energy. It could power the entire world. To do so, scientists need to figure out how to manipulate this plasma. And the plasma isn't just something that you find in your TV. Plasma is called the fourth state of matter. And this is when atoms are moving so fast that they lose their electrons. Now, with that much heat and energy, plasma is incredibly difficult to contain. And that's where a magnetic field comes in. Scientists working on this tokamak artificial sun in China have powered it up, and they have this new innovative magnetic field, so to speak, that they're using for the first time. And that their hope here is this unique design of the magnetic field could mean good things for nuclear fusion, meaning that they can manipulate it and actually get something like electricity out of it. So with the magnetic field, that plasma inside the reactor could stay stable long enough for scientists to harness the power of nuclear fusion. Because it releases so much energy, if they can harness this, they could get electric out to millions of people worldwide. This would change things big time. They've been chasing this for a long time. It looks like if they can achieve containing this with this magnetic field, which is very interesting in itself, we could see some big breakthroughs following this as well. But this artificial sun, no joke in terms of the energy and the power that it generates. And to me, they've already done all of this. They're just dropping the breadcrumbs to the public out there that they're about to release this in steps. Because I believe we're going to see a wave of technology connected to this in terms of being able to harness things inside of a magnetic field, propulsion, anti-gravitics, using mercury, all these different things you're going to see here soon. That indeed is what's going to be put inside of aircraft, vehicles, so on and so forth. But one step at a time, and this is the first, so to speak, out of China, this big step in nuclear fusion. I'm going to leave a link. Join me for the live.
CERN and NASA discovered something rather interesting in Antarctica that was supposedly, anyway, accidentally leaked to news and media. News and media then, a day later, quickly swept it under the rug. But before we do get into that, in my last video where Bill Gates had released mosquitoes, or Bill Gates and mosquitoes, I had made an evil tier list. In that tier list, I had Bill Gates in the more evil category, but I bumped him up to the most evil right above CERN. But in this tier list, I'm going to go ahead and keep Bill Gates right where he is, but I'm going to go ahead and take CERN and bump them up to the burn in hell category, but still right before and second to the World Economic Forum. Now, I do like where Kenneth Copeland currently is, so we're going to go ahead and keep him in the evil category. I don't think he's as evil or dangerous as Bill Gates or CERN, so he shouldn't be next to them. And then we have the MFers on the planes who are causing a lot of chaos on planes. We still do not know who they are yet, so we're going to go ahead and keep them in the who is this category. We do have two new additions to the tier list. We have NASA and Boeing. Now, it's very hard where I'm going to go ahead and place NASA. I do not think they're as dangerous as the World Economic Forum or CERN. So we're just going to go ahead and place NASA in the most evil category, just right before Bill. I don't know. We'll go ahead and place them in the more evil category. I don't think they're even as dangerous as Bill Gates. NASA lies a lot. Now, last but not least, we do have Boeing. We're going to go ahead and place Boeing in the most evil category, but right before Bill Gates. The reason why Boeing is so high up in the tier list happens to be because a lot has come out from the whistleblowers, the same whistleblowers who mysteriously lost their lives back to back. Rush productions, false parts put on planes could have cost a lot of lives. So I think as of right now, the evil tier list is perfect. We are going to look at the evil tier list in the introduction of my videos every Saturday. Moving back to the second highest in the evil tier list, CERN. Now, most people already know that CERN does not have the only Large Hadron Collider or the particle accelerator in the world. There are other particle accelerators. There's one in the United States, Japan, China, and so forth. All these different locations have a particle accelerator, but what about Antarctica? I am sure Antarctica has a particle accelerator hidden somewhere. Now, Antarctica actually has something different, but even more interesting. They have what is known as the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. The Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory is a neutrino observatory developed by the University of Wisconsin-Madison and constructed at the Edmundson Scott South Pole Station in Antarctica. This Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory is recognized as a CERN experiment. So supposedly, this Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory was not developed by CERN, supposedly anyway, because CERN scientists are everywhere, even inside the Vatican. Even though it was not designed by CERN, it's still recognized as a CERN experiment. I wonder why. This neutrino observatory has thousands of sensors which are located under the Antarctic ice, distributed over a cubic kilometer. So then why did they choose Antarctica in the first place to build the largest neutrino observatory? Well, the only thing the public had been told was that Antarctica has an overabundance of neutrinos, and they can also easily find these neutrinos inside the Antarctic ice. I have spoken about neutrinos in the past in other videos because neutrinos are important to CERN and other organizations, perhaps the most important quote-unquote particle to these organizations, so much so that the United States is building a $3 billion neutrino experiment referred to as the Deep Underground Neutrino Experiment, Project Dune, a large-scale project currently under construction in the United States aimed at studying neutrinos by sending a beam of them from Fermilab, once again the United States CERN, in Illinois to a detector located deep underground in South Dakota, spanning a distance of around 800 miles. These neutrinos, or another word for neutrinos happens to be ghost particles or specters, are supposedly found in everything, even bananas. They have studied neutrinos in bananas, so why does the United States need to build a $3 billion experiment just to fire off neutrinos to study them? CERN is just not interested in smashing particles together. They are not spending billions and billions of dollars just to smash particles together, but they have also said they are very interested in finding other dimensions, secret dimensions. They even have on their website the blueprints to creating a wormhole. They successfully found a way to access a higher dimension because they said a fourth dimensional entity, a ghost, which they dubbed once again a ghost particle, a neutrino, crossed over into our dimension, leading them to believe that neutrinos or ghost particles may lead to another dimension. And where there's an abundance of neutrinos, the higher the chance of finding this other dimension or secret dimension. So in Antarctica, a location that has a lot of strangeness, a lot of mystery, a lot of bizarre events linked to Antarctica, they placed the largest neutrino experiment where they have sensors deep underground in the Antarctic ice, where they said they found energetic neutrinos. In 2013, the Ice Cube neutrino experiment at the South Pole reported the observation of 2 ultra-high energy neutrino events. Later, they found more. In 2015, Ice Cube scientists reported the observation of an even higher energy neutrino event, one that offers scientists the best hope yet that they will be able to use the ultra-high energy neutrinos to find the source of ultra-high energy cosmic rays. The neutrino event had an energy of more than 2,000 trillion electron volts. So CERN found the neutrinos they were looking for deep in the Antarctic ice. And one has to ask, with this being just an observatory, what exactly did they do with these neutrinos in Antarctica? Well, shortly after the experiments began, which makes me believe the world's most powerful secret particle accelerator is either under this neutrino observatory or it's somewhere close by, because they are not going to spend billions of dollars just to observe these high energy neutrinos. No, they are going to find them with the observatory, and then they are going to experiment. A few years later, around May of 2020, we start to get articles coming out that are titled, NASA Scientists Detect Evidence of Parallel Universe Where Time Runs Backwards. In a scenario straight out of the Twilight Zone, a group of NASA scientists working on an experiment in Antarctica have detected evidence of a parallel universe where the rules of physics are the opposite of our own, according to a report. But wait a minute, when did NASA get involved? I thought that CERN and Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin, were conducting the experiment in Antarctica. Maybe this is another particle, maybe this is another experiment. Now, continuing to read this article from the New York Post back in May 19th of 2020, the article continues to say, the concept of a parallel universe has been around since the early 1960s, mostly in the minds of fans of sci-fi TV shows and comics. But now a cosmic ray detection experiment has found particles that could be from a parallel realm that also was born in the Big Bang. This is rather interesting because back in 2013 and 2015, CERN had discovered high energy neutrino particles, which they also said could help them discover cosmic rays. The experts used a giant balloon to carry NASA's Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA, high above Antarctica, where the frigid dry air provided the perfect environment with little to no radio noise to distort its findings. The article continues to say low energy subatomic neutrinos with a mass close to zero can pass completely through the Earth, but higher energy objects are stopped by the solid matter of our planet, according to the report. That means the high energy particles can only be detected coming down from space, according to NASA, but the team's Anita detected heavier particles, so-called tau neutrinos, which come up out of the Earth. The findings imply that these particles are actually traveling backward in time, suggesting evidence of a parallel universe. This is where the article gets rather interesting. At the end of the article, it says, of course, if there are any inhabitants of a possible parallel universe, they'd consider us the backward ones. We're left with the most exciting and the most boring possibilities, said Ibrahim Safa, who also worked on the experiment. So something happened back in 2015, 2016, where CERN discovered these high energy neutrinos that led them to discover this other dimension. They call in NASA. If NASA wasn't already there, we don't know. But they supposedly called in NASA to do some more research, and this individual, Ibrahim Safa, starts running his mouth because only 2 days later, they start to backtrack. They start to release articles. No, NASA or CERN did not discover any parallel universe in Antarctica. That is misinformation. This isn't the first time that NASA, and it's not surprising that NASA and CERN work hand in hand. These are two heavily occultic organizations. They were also working hand in hand during the April 8th solar eclipse. We had CERN running the Large Hadron Collider to find dark matter, while CERN was firing off 3 rockets known as a PEP, or the devil, at the solar eclipse. It is also not surprising that NASA would be involved with CERN in exploring other dimensions, given the fact that NASA's founder, Jack Parsons, was a student of Aleister Crowley, who was all about bringing entities over to this dimension. Remember Aleister Crowley's demon lamb? It is known the founder of NASA, Jack Parsons, is heavy in the occult. He, L. Ron Hubbard, Walt Disney, among others, would take Aleister Crowley's workings, such as the Babylon workings. They would go to deserts like the New Mexico desert, and they would practice in summoning these entities over. So NASA and CERN, they go to Antarctica and they find these high energy neutrinos, which are already linked to higher dimensions. And they find this other dimension where time runs backwards. And supposedly, according to this scientist who worked on the experiment, those who would inhabit this dimension would find us as the backwards ones. So like I said, only a couple days later, articles start to come out that no, NASA didn't find a parallel universe where time runs backwards. Sorry, but the truth is you're stuck with this universe for now. Multiple big news agencies who first released articles about NASA finding this parallel universe are now running these articles back, such as the New York Post, only 2 days later on May 21st, are now releasing articles saying, no, scientists did not discover a parallel universe in Antarctica. Now, I'm reading this article from CNET back in May 22nd of 2020, where they go on to say how the 2020s have been very bad, but the good news is apparently scientists have discovered a parallel universe just like our own. It's a little different to ours, though. In this mirror universe, or this mirror world, time runs backwards. It's like a Benjamin Button universe. That means that they're heading back to 2019. The article continues to say, well, now more bad news. I'm here to spoil the parallel universe party. Scientists haven't actually discovered a parallel universe, but you might think they have based on multiple reports from across the web. And yes, multiple big news agencies from Fox, ABC, CNN, New York Post, and so forth were all reporting the exact same thing. And like I said, only days later, they are now retracting the report. The unusual Anita events have been known and discussed since 2016, a year after CERN had discovered these neutrinos, says Ron Eckers, an honorary fellow at CSIRO, Australia's national science agency. After 4 years, there has been no satisfactory explanation of the anomalous events seen by Anita, so this is very frustrating, especially to those involved. Although the new scientist report was filed on April 8th, funny, the same day as the solar eclipse, just a couple years apart, the Anita results are almost 2 years old. The theory has only recently caught fire. Ever more urgent headlines have spurred its spread across social media. NASA uncovers evidence of bizarre parallel universe where physics time operate in reverse, reads one. Another says scientists may have found evidence of a parallel universe. Peter Gorham, the principal investigator on Anita, says it's some unfortunate tabloid journalism and notes an early report by the Daily Star just made some things up about myself and our experiment. I wouldn't doubt that this was leaked on purpose, quote unquote, leaked on purpose, because for whatever reason, NASA, CERN, they have to let us know what they're doing. And then always a couple days later, everything gets hushed. This is not what we told you. It's actually something else. Don't believe what we told you earlier. And it all gets swept under the rug. This article also mentions that there's also another neutrino observatory at the South Pole, which is the Ice Cube, which has been following up on the Anita observations and suggests the standard model of physics cannot explain these strange events. So CERN in 2013 and 2015 just find a couple of these high energy, high charge neutrinos. NASA goes out there 1 year later and outflows a stream of these neutrinos from a spot in Antarctica. So you have to ask yourself, did somebody or someone or some organization open something up in this location? Well, like I said previously in this video, back in March of 2024, CERN has admitted inside of CERN, there is this fourth dimensional entity, a neutrino, a ghost particle, exploring CERN. And they captured this fourth dimensional entity. Now we have, as coincidence may have it, quote unquote, coincidence may have it, we have all these countries around the world, including the United States, Japan, and others, that want to study these neutrinos to the point that it will cost them billions and billions of dollars. Like in Antarctica, the United States, under the Dune Project, will be smashing these neutrinos together in hopes of opening this wormhole or this parallel dimension or this parallel universe, whatever it is you want to call it, where things will stream through. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel and you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're So this is not going to be a very long video, but it's something I noticed when it comes to the VMAs, but not just the VMAs, but pretty much all over. And I have noticed that we are seeing a lot of portal imagery. When it comes to the imagery of portals, it is a very close second when it comes to the conversation of UFOs and aliens. The conversation of UFOs and aliens really exploded between 2023 and 2024. Not from the public, but from news, media, and the powers that be, the government. Does anybody remember that golden age, that golden time when UFOs, aliens were considered nothing more than swamp gas, weather balloon, flying turtles? Yes, that was a real news report. A person saw a spherical light in the sky. News said that is the old optical illusion trick by flying turtles. Now, I don't know what that meant. I think I was in 8th grade collecting Pokemon cards. The point is, they would do everything and anything to sweep the conversation of UFOs and aliens under the rug, to completely mask that conversation. Yet, for whatever reason, between 2023 and 2024, they really want us to take the conversation of UFOs and aliens very seriously.
I think it's incredibly important to listen to the specific words that Grush uses. You know, Grush never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional.
One member used the term, what they were exploring here were, her phrase, interdimensional beings. Is that something that we're dealing with here potentially?
I mean, I think it's easy to be disappointed when you don't get all the information that you want, which I understand. I would have loved to receive much more information, but I think that it's reasonable to say that everyone that was in the room received probably new information. I certainly did, and I think it's interesting, additional information to continue the investigation and ask more questions. So definitely have more questions than less questions.
Even when the public does not want to talk about UFOs, they will still beat into our heads the conversation of UFOs. But now it looks like portals are the latest craze for the media. But don't worry, aliens and UFOs are still there. Matter of fact, the VMAs decided to combine both. So the VMAs happened on September 11th, and to be honest with you, if somebody did not tell me about them, I would not even have known they were going on, but they were. So there was a lot of strange imagery taking place at the VMAs. We had Taylor Swift wearing a UFO corset. We had this woman, Sabrina Carpenter, who they are propping up as the next big star on stage, dancing and making out with a female alien. And then we had Katy Perry singing her E.T. song. So are they trying to tell us something? So going back to Katy Perry's on stage singing her song E.T. Now, if you have ever seen the music video for E.T., you know it has to do with a fallen alien, you get what I'm saying? Coming out of space and landing onto Earth. There is no portal imagery in the music video, yet for whatever reason on stage, she is using a portal to sing this song. While she's coming through the portal, there are a bunch of people dressed in gray surrounding the portal. Does that remind you of anything? Think about it for a second. We have a bunch of people dressed up as gray entities surrounding a portal, while another entity comes through the portal as they are singing. Does this not remind you of the closing ceremony of the Olympics? Go back to the Olympics. We have a bunch of gray entities surrounding a portal, while this golden Voyager makes its way through the portal. At the same time, we have this fellow here in the portal singing the hymn to Apollo. The golden Voyager during the closing ceremony is basically the same concept of Katy Perry's music video, E.T., where it's seen coming out of the sky, falling from the sky, and touching down to Earth. These pieces right here are the different continents of the Earth, but pushed together because they want to share that message once again of unity, oneness. This is not a coincidence. They are giving you a message. The only difference is Katy Perry is taking both the role of the Golden Voyager and the singer inside the portal. Even the way Katy Perry and her backup dancers are dancing is very reminiscent to how the Golden Voyager and those gray entities, those people dressed up as those gray entities, were dancing. This is something that I have spoken about on my channel for quite some time now. This is where these entities are flooding over from. They are flooding over from portals, from other dimensions. Now, we cannot talk about portals and not talk about CERN. And I noticed ever since CERN has been very, very active, we have been seeing an overabundance of portal imagery. Reading this article directly from CERN on June 12, 2024, this article talks about how this summer will be CERN's most productive, most active summer in history. Now, during the solar eclipse, CERN let the Large Hadron Collider run uninterrupted between March and April. But during the summer, CERN let the Large Hadron Collider run uninterrupted between June 5th and August 19th. So this is the Large Hadron Collider's longest run for being active. Remember those news articles that were coming out that these fourth dimensional entities, these ghosts, these spirits, were crossing over at CERN, and CERN was labeling them as particles to make it sound more like science. Now we have the United States building an underground Large Hadron Collider, spending billions of dollars to build this Large Hadron Collider, the biggest Large Hadron Collider, the biggest particle accelerator in the world, that stretches from South Dakota to Illinois, to smash these particles together, what they are labeling neutrinos, or these ghost particles. They are spending billions of dollars to just smash these particles that are found in everything. This tells me they are doing something else. They are nicknaming this Dune project here in the United States the telephone. Of course they are. Reading this article from the New York Times, it says, in the coming years, some of the world's top particle physicists plan to transform this realm into the listening end of an 800-mile, $5 billion tin can telephone. With it, they hope to hear a whispered answer to an existential question. How did we get here? This is what they are spending $5 billion for? This is the official answer to what they are doing underground. Do you really believe this? Do you really believe they are spending $5 billion in all this work underground to answer the question of how they got here? These same people that believe this are the same people that will give that pastor money. What's that pastor's name that says if you give him money, you'll go to heaven? I just did a video about him. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But yeah, these people will give that pastor money. We even have the Denver airport making portal jokes, saying they are building tunnels, but it's definitely not a portal. Continuing to read this article from the New York Times, it says, the message will be carried by incoming neutrinos. Remember, these are the ghosts, the spirits, strange elusive particles that weigh almost nothing and move almost as fast as light. At the telephone's other end, a half-mile wide particle accelerator operated by the Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory, Fermilab, just outside Chicago, will create trillions of neutrinos every second in a narrow beam pointed squarely at this cavern. They will sail underground, not through a tunnel, but through 3 states worth of solid bedrock. I cannot wait to hear the stories of people seeing very bizarre things. I cannot wait for all the bizarre and strange news stories after this is activated, because I am sure this is going to produce a lot of content far more interesting than the people on the planes. These people are opening things up. They are playing with things they should not be playing with. And they are using these corncobs here to push the message, to push the agenda, to tell us what they are doing in plain sight. But in any case, thank you so much for watching. If you like this channel,
Kofi, follow me.